Yeah, you get to draft the next round of legislation.
Okay.
I'm not coming.
Can I make it say anything I want?
Well, you gotta get everybody else on board. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Whose bike helmet is this?
Mine.
I'm impressed. 80 plus degrees and get biked over.
Well, it's an e-bike, so I don't sweat at all.
Oh, the truth comes out.
Good breeze, it's like riding a motorcycle, that's right. Beautiful breeze.
That's Pete Coughlin on his e-bike. For those of you watching at home. All right, so we have the meeting notice for today, call to order. We'll call this June 18, 2024 meeting of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission to order. Roll call, please, Heather.
Carla Black.
Present.
I don't see Brian Bronson, he said he'd be there, so. Peter Coughlin.
Yeah.
Rebecca Graham.
Here.
James Katsiopoulos,
Here.
Chris McCabe.
Here.
Roberta Manter.
Here.
John Monk.
Here.
Catherine is not here. And Steve Young.
Here.
And Vivian and Ryan had told me they're gonna be out today.
Okay.
Did Kathy say she was gonna be out today?
I did not hear from her, so either way.
I almost thought she did, but I maybe sing to one of the others.
So is that the latest in stand-up desks, Heather?
I'm sorry.
No, don't
I'm my
apologize.
sciatica, so I'm just gonna stand. I hope it doesn't bother anyone.
It doesn't bother anyone at all. I'm just.
No,
marveling at
it's
the
not.
light.
I'm just using a lectern so I can kind of like see the skin and not like, put pressure on my back.
No, I'm marveling at the lack of technology that we have here, so I
It
apologize
is
for
the
that.
state, so.
No, we do. Make those resources last. All right, so next is adoption of the May 13, 2024 minutes. Has everyone been able to get a copy and take a look?
Did.
Right. Any changes? All right, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roberta, second, okay. And we'll have to do I'm sorry, Heather, roll call vote.
Okay, Carla,
Yes.
Peter,
Yeah.
Brian's not here, Rebecca.
Yes.
And James,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Roberta,
Yes.
Vivian's out, John,
Yes.
Catherine's out, Ryan is out, Steve.
Yes.
So carried.
All right, so we have two substantive items today. As you'll recall, at our first meeting, we created two subgroups. Group one, looking at the public use of public easements, and so there's a report from the subcommittee on that. Group two is limited liability for landowners, how we can try to limit liability. Interestingly enough, the membership of both subcommittees is the same. We probably need a little more representation there. If there was someone who were interested in recreational use of public easements, it would be helpful to have that voice on the committee, whether it's snowmobiles, ATVs. John,
I saw that in the notes and I'll pick that out.
okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. So with that, I don't want to do all the talking this afternoon. Is there a member of Group One who would like to present the Group One subcommittee report? That would be,
I did a couple of slideshows. I don't know if you want to watch that or not.
I think we had talked about you doing that in the subcommittee. So certainly that if we have the technology to be able to put on the slideshows.
She brought me a nice little digital. Was it the public easement one or
Let's
is it?
see,
Yes.
there's two. One is damage to public easements and the other is public easements.
Okay, which one did you want to show, Roberta?
Either one, I think they're both kind of relevant to the
Alright, well, I
same
guess
subject. I split it because it was getting too big.
I have this one up, so what if I share my screen
Okay.
so everybody can see that? Do you want me to go to the next page?
Yep, and I think you have to manually move it down one each time. Okay, how not to preserve a road. People are not aware, who are not aware of how to preserve a road, tend to drive in the same two ruts rather than using the whole road surface. Over time, they end up with two ruts and the high spot in the middle keeps getting higher until they bottom out. People will swear they don't do this, but the tire tracks don't lie. There's grass growing in the middle, you know they're not driving on it. The mechanics of road damage due to public use. On a road that has at least some gravel and where the residents are more careful to use the whole road surface, the damage may not be obvious after just one trip by someone just passing through. But repeated use and or use by heavy trucks, even in the best of conditions, compresses the road into a sort of W shape. The tires push soil up at the edges of the road, obliterating the crown and causing runoff to run down the sides of the road instead of running off the sides. Running down the road rather than running off the sides. Next slide.
Okay.
Is it not showing up?
It's not.
Huh.
Okay, a second.
Thought we had it all. Some of these slides were taken on our road, but there's also a lot of other people's roads all over the place that I've taken. People sent me pictures.
Don't take away my good bird hunting roads, Roberta. Those grassy center lines are good spots for birds.
You're there.
Okay.
Get on this side.
There we
Okay,
go.
but that's there.
This subtle damage becomes more obvious when it rains hard. Gully washers, trash movers, and toad stranglers. Friend of mine used to say. Well, that's where to go.
Okay.
Okay, where there's a long hill, the water cannot escape from the road. The water that cannot escape from the road gathers volume and momentum, resulting in erosion. Note that there's a ditch to the left, not much of a ditch, but there is a ditch there. But the water can't escape from the tire tracks to get there. Same hill as in previous picture. This is the result of that runoff. Now that there's an established runoff route, it will get washed out more with every storm. Eventually it can look like this. How much will it cost the landowner to repair the damage? If the road is used when it's too soft, the damage is more serious. This tire track was left by someone using the road when it was too soft, then it rained. Another example of erosion due to water being unable to escape from a tire track, and that's just one pass, one vehicle. Water that can't escape from a rut keeps the road saturated, prolonging mud season. Note that where the residents drove, straddling the middle of the road ruts where everyone else drives, and avoiding using the road during the warmest part of the day, they barely left tire tracks. But someone else drove in and out again in the same two ruts while the road was soft. When we ask people to stay off the road because the frost is going out of it, their usual response is, "Oh, that's okay, I've got four-wheel drive." That's not the point. Just because you can get through doesn't mean that you should. With the small equipment we have available, it will take days of unpaid labor to get this smoothed out once mud season ends. One of the slides I was thinking of putting in here shows where my husband broke a couple of the rake teeth on the York rake and had to buy replacements. And when the replacements came, they were this much longer than the ones he'd been using. He'd worn that much off the rake. Let's see, not every landowner can afford to own a tractor with a grader blade or a York rake. They make do with what they have, whether that means dragging a pallet, bed spring, or a section of chain link fence weighted down with rocks. One family resorted to hitching their riding horses to a tractor tire and having them drag that up and down the road. Driving on a road that has minimal gravel during mud season cuts through the gravel to the clay underneath, mixing it all together. Water won't drain through clay, and the crown has been destroyed, so the water stays trapped in the ruts for weeks. Repeated damage. This is where I say that just making compensation once isn't sufficient. This is the entrance to Young Road on, what was the date there? Can you go back up?
1982.
Yeah, November 3rd, 1982. Same spot as above, March 20th, 1983, just a few months later. While we were staying at a neighbor's to avoid using the road, someone drove in and out again in the same two ruts during a hard all-day rain at the height of mud season. The water couldn't escape from their ruts, so instead of draining off into the woods, it gained volume and momentum down a quarter-mile slope. And when all that water finally spilled over into the ditch and hit the culvert at the entrance to the road, it blew out the culvert. When we returned, we couldn't get within a half mile of our house. We had no idea who it was, so there's no way to hold them accountable. Without the funds to replace the culvert, we towed the pipe out of the way and forded the stream for over a year. We just kind of graded it into a dip and put some flat rocks on each side for the tires to go on. Finally, on December 18th, 1984, a logger who wanted to use the road replaced the culvert. In the spring of 1987, the culvert washed out again. The discontinuance process does include a provision for awarding damages at the time of discontinuance, but how does that compensate residents for future repeated damage? Or how could damage that was awarded in the 1940s compensate for the unanticipated damage caused by repeating logging operations from the 1970s through the present, using skidders, feller bunchers, and 80 to 100,000 pound log trucks, which didn't exist in the 1940s? Fortunately, most loggers are now more responsible than they were in the 1980s, when this was what was left for residents after yet another logging operation. 17 MRS 3853D and 23 MRS 3029A would probably have helped here, but they didn't exist yet. Unfortunately, those laws still don't help when someone damages the road while no one is around to identify who did it, like the previous ones of the culvert. Public use in the absence of public maintenance, and I'll probably get complaints about this one, but yes, Jordan versus Canton was about the limited user highway law, which was repealed. But what the court said in that case is nevertheless true. Cases involving loss of access depend on the practical and factual consequences of governmental action rather than the legal status of the highway. In short, it is actual and practical discontinuance rather than technical discontinuance that destroys the easement. The fact that a road continues to have a legal status as a public way over which there continues to be a public easement or travel is meaningless if there is no longer any public responsibility for maintenance and repair. Without maintenance or repair, it is only a question of time before a public road will become impassable or unsafe for travel. The rigors of Maine weather, the action of frost, and the erosion from rain and melting snow will speed the process of disintegration. The ability to use the road for vehicular travel, and thus the abutter's easement of access to and over the road to the public road system, will inevitably be destroyed. Use of this public easement in Oxford County by ATVs has left it rutted and holding water, which keeps it soft, hampering landowner access. Photo taken May 27th, 2022, well after mud season. It still looks like that. Impact of other uses on residential access. Bowling Hill Road in Liberty, access to seasonal and year-round residences destroyed by ATVs and mud runners and by a commercial blueberry grower coming in with a tractor during mud season. Again, this was before 17 MRS section 3853D and 23 MRS 3029A, but that would only have possibly helped against users who could be identified, and then only if it could be proven to what extent they were responsible for the damage. Runoff from Bowling Hill Road dumps silt into Lake St. George. Should the landowners be held liable for environmental damage if those who damaged the road could not be identified? You see a plume of silt coming out of the culvert there. Discontinued roads could be posted heavy loads limited, but they rarely are. Such posting is usually lifted when paved roads are ready to take the load. But discontinued roads, often being shaded and having little or no gravel, need more time to firm up. Even with posting, trucks are allowed to haul when the temperature is below freezing. But if it was above freezing most of the night and only dipped below 32 just before dawn, the road will be nowhere near firm enough to support a log truck. On top of that, if a landowner calls to report someone violating the posting, in rural areas, a truck driver can load his truck and leave before law enforcement arrives. Use by sportsmen. The discontinued Ed Rose Road in Wayne, where one trapper drove into the beaver dam and went back out again in the same two ruts. Pictures were taken soon after it happened, about 10 years ago. Fortunately, once word got around that you couldn't get past the beaver dam, no one else has tried to drive in since. But due to that one set of tire tracks, now the whole hill is washed out. This is what it looks like now. I'm actually standing up on the bank, which is about 4 feet above the roadway and looking down at it. So it's really washed out pretty badly. Ed Rose Road, June 2024. Up until 1989, when the culvert at the Beaver Dam went out, this was a nice horseback trail. Now the stones would hurt their feet and be a tripping hazard. Not good for jogging or biking either. Kennebec Land Trust would like to prohibit motor vehicular travel on the Surrey Road, which abuts their land, but they can't because it's a public easement. Along the road by Kennebec Land Trust land, the damage starts at the top of the hill. Recreational trails intended for hiking, biking, etc. should not be open to four-wheel drive trucks. The runoff continues down the hill. There's plenty of drop-off on the other side of the road where this water could drain to, but it can't get there. Someone had dug cutouts at intervals to let the water drain off, but the next time someone drove through when it was soft, their tires pushed dirt up along the sides of the road and established a new channel down the road. Along the road by Kennebec Land Trust land further down the hill, the water has gained volume and momentum. Further along Surrey Road, going up the slope on the other side of the low point. Again, one vehicle at the wrong time, April 2022. Same spot as in the previous picture, April 2024. It keeps getting worse. Same spot, June 8th, 2024. The grass hides it, but it's washed out even more. Up until last year, it was possible to mow this road to reduce ticks. That's no longer practical. On a 2.5-mile walk, I picked up 39 ticks. Good thing I didn't have the dog with me. He's an expert tick sweeper. More areas on the same road. You kind of have to put on your high boots in order to walk the road now. Not fun. There's lower ground where the water could drain off, but it can't get there because the mud runners have trapped the water in the road. Surrey Road was a pleasant walking trail until a year ago. Even the logging operation did only minimal damage, but then the mud runners ruined it. You just scroll down to get to the next one. Here you go. Someone bought land abutting this abandoned road in Mount Vernon and fixed it up so he could have better access. But once the public saw that it was opened up so they could use it, they did. They crushed his culverts and chewed ruts into the road so the water couldn't get to the ditches, resulting in this long hill washing out badly. If the purpose for retaining a public easement over an abandoned or discontinued road, as opposed to private access, is to provide recreational access and fire access, leaving it open to all vehicular use fulfill that purpose, this is now a safety hazard and not through any fault of the landowner. Hebo Road in Lebanon was considered private property after its discontinuance in 1928 and was gated. Then in 1994, the court declared that subject to gates and bars meant it was a public easement. Since then, it has been used heavily by ATVs and dirt bikes. This is the result. Sorry for the blurry image. It's a screenshot from a video. And I've got the link where you can go and watch the whole video if you want. Starting at the 15-minute, 20-second mark from there to the end. ATV clubs are getting more responsible as they realize they will lose permission, but it only takes one road to spoil it for everyone. A great many roads were discontinued or abandoned precisely because they had steep hills that were prone to erosion, or went through bogs that became impassable much of the year, or got flooded out by beavers. So if they were difficult to keep passable while they were being maintained by the county or town, it's only to be expected that public use without public maintenance will do serious damage to the access. Bear in mind that where there are discontinued roads that people live on that don't look this bad, that's only because the residents have poured their time, money, and effort into holding back the tide of damage. Otherwise, they would look just as bad. People who move in onto these roads generally know they'll have to build the road for themselves, and that they may have to walk in mud season until they can get it fixed up, and that's fine with them. What they do not anticipate is that as soon as they make the road passable, the public will use it, and the public won't walk in mud season. In many cases, it's the public's use, not their own, that makes the residents want the town to resume maintenance. Building a road that will hold up under heavy use is too expensive to impose on landowners. Restricting use to that of abutters would greatly reduce the cost.
That was the last slide.
Last one, okay. I don't know if you want to spend the time to look at the other one,
The other one on,
the other slideshow.
what's that involved?
The other one is public uses of public easements.
Sure, that's,
Okay.
that's germane to the topic.
Okay.
should we have comments on the first one before going to the second, or?
You have some, I think that'd be fair. Go ahead.
One thing I was just looking at there, I used to work for a pulp and paper company in the Woodlands department, and been exposed to a lot of education related to road construction, and I've been involved in inspections and things like that. And one of the things I noticed for sure is, first of all, the roads, if you're going through that much organic soil, obviously you're going to have problems. And I did notice like long trenches with no cross drainages and things like that. Right next to my house here, there's a ridge, there's a large vernal pool. A new road was put in just skirting the hill, and we've lost wood frogs and toads in our vernal pool because all the flow is directed now that way, right? It doesn't go where it normally would go. There's a big seep on the side of the road. So just the construction of the road itself, the location of it, related to soils and all that, to me, one of the things we should have, if we're talking this, is standards for road construction itself. If you're gonna, start talking about who's responsible for that, for what, I mean, the actual location of the road, the purpose of the road, who put it there, they all need maintenance, but certainly we've got some standards that we could try to forward related to best management practices for soil and water conservation and that kind of thing. I just want to throw that out. Thank you.
And kind of the problem with that is that these roads were already located. These are discontinued roads that used to be town roads or county roads. So we don't have much control over the location. That's where they were built. And then the question is, who is supposed to bring them up to standard? Should it be the responsibility of the resident who wants to live on the road? Or should it be shared by the people who want to put it to other purposes? Whether it's, industrial uses or recreational uses or whatever.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think it would be, another thing would be to look at the state, like rather than fix the same problem year after year after year, if the road was looked at, if you have improper drainage, if you have this kind of thing, that same place I was talking about, they plugged a culvert. Now there's a lot more flow that way, like I said, and they're going to have to address that. But I mean, you can look at the topography and the soil composition and find out what your problems are. And if it requires you to officially close the road at certain times of the year because, like you said, it's too soft seasonally, then that should be done. And I think that's the way to go.
Well, think about it this way, if you would. Every municipality that I know of in this state, and Rebecca can chime in on this one, because she'll know some of the numbers. Just about every municipality in the state has road standards. And those road standards are for roads that the town or city is going to accept responsibility for and to maintain. And if you're going to build a subdivision, you have to build to those road standards. So any new road gets built to those standards. And any existing road is going to be maintained along those standards. Problem here is that these are roads that the municipality no longer has the obligation to maintain because it discontinued them or because the road use was abandoned because the town stopped maintaining them or using public monies, or the public stopped using them. And so those roads weren't maintained because they weren't needed at some point. And it could be that the town didn't want them because they were too steep and too expensive to maintain, and nobody lived on it, and they were just logging tracks. So if that's the case, many of those are discontinued without any public rights being reserved, no public easement, no private way subject to gates and bars. Those that were, the municipality has the right but not the obligation to maintain. And so it's hard to posit a responsibility to build them back up to any standard, to maintain them at any standard, where it's nebulous. I mean, the reason that the municipality doesn't maintain them anymore is that they weren't needed anymore, and so they were abandoned or discontinued, and people have gone out to live on them. You know, there's some towns who say you can build on a road so long as there's some public right. Public easement is a public right of access. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed it's gonna be maintained. But the land's gonna be cheap because it's not maintained. There's no guarantee. And that's where people are building, and suddenly they're saying, oh, well, you know, the road needs to be fixed. We have rights, we need maintenance, we need somebody to help us. That's what this commission's all about. How do we resolve those sorts of disputes that have come up? So I agree that standards are helpful. But Steve, these standards are in effect throughout the state for roads that the public has to maintain. And the question is, what do you do for these that the public has decided we don't want to have to maintain them anymore?
Hey, Jim, though, I do disagree a little bit because like I had a meeting with Wagner recently and they had a forester come in and they hold a private landowner to a standard. They were showing different violations where they don't have the right ditching, they don't have a cross culvert like Steve's saying, and they're held to a standard and they're fined for that.
Who's this? Wagner.
Wagner is a paper company. They're a large landowner in the state of Maine. And they actually, forestry goes out and looks at their roads that they're logging on. And if they don't have the right drainage, if they don't have the right ditches, that if they go directly into a stream, they hold them to those standards.
Okay, but they have a right to enforce standards on those lands. Whereas,
Right, this is
to
it.
pick on poor Roberta
Right.
on her road, but
Right.
on John Young Road in Fayette, forestry doesn't have the authority to go on and say, Roberta, David,
No.
I'm sorry, but that
No.
needs a crown and that needs a culvert.
But I was just saying that that's a private road, like,
Right.
so they do have standards for private roads. This is like in the middle where it's no man's land. Like,
Exactly.
there's nothing there. The other thing I was gonna comment on, like, just your pictures and stuff, like, I saw like 5 violations that I would deal with. 2 of those weren't ATV trails. There's ATVs running up there for no reason. So what are they doing there? I mean, those are easy to track down. Like, we track them down all the time. You follow the tracks and you find where the wheelers are coming from. Most of the time, it's someone in the neighborhood and you give them a ticket. So I think there's some stuff there that's like, needs to be addressed in violations. Like, I know that, like, going a little off topic, but in one of the notes was about game cameras and stuff. It's not about Wi-Fi, it's about cellular data for a cell camera. Like, you get connectivity through that, but we don't use cell cameras all the time. You can use just a regular game camera and they're super successful. I know that you and I talked about this, but you had a landowner in the Mount Vernon case that had issues. He has other issues that are involved in that. That's not a game camera issue, that's an operator error. He's gotta get other stuff that works or use it correctly. I mean, water in his game camera is most likely from somebody that, like, not someone putting water in it. It's from him not closing it or something like that.
That's not what I hear from him.
The other problem is you can't, I mean, we're running into this. You can't legally put up a game
Right.
camera without landowner permission.
Right.
Well, he's putting it on his own land.
No,
Is he?
but we're saying,
If you're in a right of way that the town says is a public easement, then it's debatable if it's on its own land.
He's
That's
putting-
the whole
he's putting them
underlying-
on his own land off the right of way.
Right.
And somebody keeps coming across the right of way onto his land and tampering with his cameras, stealing his cameras, erasing the cards on his cameras.
Well, that can
Putting
happen.
something in front
I
of
mean,
it so you
I've got
can't see
cameras
anything.
on cameras.
Hmm?
That was the only way we caught somebody doing that once before, which is kind of
it's
whatever,
funny,
but.
like,
But I would agree, honestly, I mean, I'll own the fact that there's a lot of damage out there from ATVs, but most of those pictures, those were trucks, the tire tracks and everything, the way they are, they're full-size vehicles. I've said for years, everybody hates me, but we passed, the ATV community got pissed at me, but we passed a mud season law that shut ATVs down. It's 100% illegal if you're running during mud season, not on your own land. We need to do the same thing on pickups and Jeeps, but everybody is like, I mean, I took help from the ATV community when we did it, and Sam and everybody else is opposed to doing it on trucks, but honestly, that's what we saw. I mean, 3 years ago, we closed the ATV trail system, kept it closed through Memorial Day weekend. People went in with pickups on the ATV trail system and damaged the whole thing, and Weyerhaeuser said, you gotta fix it all, and I said, if you're gonna make me fix it all, then I'm gonna open it up to ATVers. Cause if the ATV community is gonna pay to fix it, they ought to at least get the enjoyment of using it, and frankly, if they'd gone by ATVs instead of pickups to go fishing or whatever they were doing, we'd have had a lot less damage. So there's gotta be some way to regulate that, but I know that public at large, it's like, that's a traditional use, you can't stop that. But we've made night and day difference on ATV. ATV maintenance has become manageable, still an expense and a process that we couldn't even touch before we had the mud season law. That changed a lot of things, and that, frankly, it would with the regular vehicles as well, but I'm sure we'd get outcry, probably getting the legislature to act on that would be.
I liked Roberta's suggestion at the last meeting about a tax for vehicles that are, you know, super heavy duty pickups. You know, you see them where, you know, even if you're tall, you're looking at the top of the hood, you know what I mean? And they're big trucks, they're equipped with these ginormous tires. And a lot of them, whether they work in the forest products industry or they like just driving mud roads, I mean, that is a humongous impact. And that's what I was concerned about, is limiting ATVs, is that I find the pickup trucks are worse.
We could consider what New Hampshire's got. If you're gonna use a truck off-road, you have to have an off-road sticker, you pay for that. And if you don't use it off-road, if your souped up, jacked up truck is just a grocery getter, then so be it. But if you're gonna use it off-road, you pay. And then that payment, as I understand it, goes into extra for enforcement and damage mitigation. You have to get more details on that, Chris, you may have, but I know they have to have a sticker to use it off-road. If I want to take my truck hunting, I have to have it, one of them stickers on it if I'm off-road, unless I'm on my own land.
It would be really helpful to know where that money goes. Do you pay it to the
Yeah.
state? Does it stay?
It's to the state, it's a government thing, but exactly how the state breaks it down, we'd all like to know how those things work.
Well, the thing is, it would be great, and it would help a municipality, maybe if some share goes to it to help maintain those roads that it decides it wants to maintain. But that doesn't help Roberta's road.
No,
No, I know, just.
Right.
It just, right.
But it would help, in theory, I won't pretend I have all the info on it, but if you take your truck and you buy one of them stickers, there's a record of it. So there'd be some record of who's doing this, right? Which might make it easier for Chris to actually track down culprits who, if they're going in. And again, without a law, it's education, but education is better than nothing. At least you'd have an opportunity to, when they pay $10 for a sticker or whatever it is, to get paperwork that says, look, please be advised, because I'll be honest with you, what we've been seeing the last few years is we get as much truck damage from hunters during hunting season as we do in the spring of the year. Because what I see it all the time, and I have to, you know, myself, I've been there and went, you can go in the morning and it is froze. But at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, after beating around the woods and I can't find the deer anymore, and I only want to go out and eat, and you're trying to come up that same road, it's not gonna be froze again until after midnight, and they're not gonna wait, and they slop out it. And
it doesn't, and the vegetation doesn't come back that year, it's too late, so in the spring, you got real problems.
not only does the vegetation not come back, but the rut freezes in place, and it is a channel in the spring for sure. We see it, there's no question, but how to best address that, I don't know. But I know that when we stopped it for ATVs and made it straight up, it's mud season, if you're out there riding, you're breaking the law. I bet we eliminated, what, Chris, 95% of the damage we've been having?
What do you consider mud season for ATVs?
When we tell them it's over.
Usually
Depends on
Memorial
the weather.
Weekend is typically that's the standard.
I mean, like down east, the
Begin
Sunrise
when-
Trail, we might open it May 1st, but they're
Soon as
closed,
snow
sign closed until we remove those signs.
Snowmobile trails start to close, like, and there's not enough snowmobiling, like, that's considered like the start of mud season, cause like, that's the in-between season. And it will go till Memorial Day typically.
Is that typically when the damage happens from pickup trucks and logging trucks,
That's the
anecdotally, from what
word.
you guys know?
Well, I would say there's as much damage from trucks in the fall, but the damage that ATVs were doing for sure was in the spring.
The problem, what we see on the landscape is a lot of people, it's that cabin fever type thing in the springtime and people going out, like I went by a place the other day over in Anson. And I looked at the trucks and they're all covered in mud, and I looked on their property and they're tearing through their own piece of woods there. But they're just gonna go to another piece, and to Brian's point about like New Hampshire's off-road permit, the people that are causing damage intentionally, they're not gonna buy a permit.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they wanna, well, cause damage, they're not gonna follow any rules if we make a law.
Mm.
They're the ones that are
Yeah.
gonna go screw it anyway.
And plus they're drunk.
That's-
Maybe we should put the tax on alcohol.
Are you gonna drive while you have that? Right,
It'd be $1 redemption fee.
Yeah, Brian, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I like the idea of a tax on souped up trucks. As you said, Chris, it's trying to catch the road that doesn't follow the laws.
I don't totally agree with a tax on someone that because they have like DFGs on their truck. I mean, my wife drives a Toyota 4Runner and she has oversized tires on it. Do I think that she should have to have a tax on her vehicle?
If she's not taking it to go out mud running.
We have a camp up on Parlin Pond that we drive on Warehouser land to go there. So we go off-road on a private road. I don't think that she should have to pay a tax for that.
Okay, so it's gotta be some real specific things of what it.
Well, that's
applies
what I was
to,
gonna
what
say.
doesn't.
So like, where do you stop it? Fox
Yeah.
shocks? Do you get, does it have to be a 2.5 inch or a 3 inch lift? Does it have to be 44 inch tires?
Hmm.
Like, where do you draw the line? I mean, I know people that drive oversized vehicles with light packages underneath them and they drive them in Portland.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like, where do you draw that line? I don't know. I mean,
Well, maybe you could have a, like, as long as you get that or a permission thing, like warehouse or permission thing, either one, that'd be fine, you know.
okay, well, the idea is that if you drive a motor vehicle or a truck in a city, you pay an excise tax in any city or town in Maine.
Or you do on any vehicle in anywhere.
Well, you do, that's right. But the whole idea of the excise tax is to help defray the cost of maintaining the roads.
Yeah.
It stays locally. That's what the purpose is
Right.
for. So what we're saying is sort of a super excise tax for big trucks. And
Well,
figure out how to
maybe.
define it, that use off-road.
I'll be
Or
honest.
maybe a law that says you can't use it off-road if it's mud season.
Or I'll be honest with you, like, we have it all the time. I followed my GPS down there with my Corolla and they drove down a discontinued road that literally goes in and we have to get a tow truck to go in and get them. Does that person, should they be paying a tax just because they're down that, I mean, it could be any vehicle. I mean, we see it all the time, Honda Civic, anything like that. I
We
mean,
get into that on the other slide, sure.
So it's difficult to define when something becomes an off-road vehicle, because anything could be an
Yeah.
off-road vehicle.
Right.
So maybe Brian's initial thought about a limitation of when your window for operating on these roads. There's some limitation on large vehicles, on ATVs, you just can't.
this is a question that, like, I mean, cause I mean, we do it all the time. We provide landowners with gates all the time. If there's a discontinued road with a public easement, why don't they have seasonal gates on them?
Who's going to control the gates if there's a public
The
easement?
municipality.
Well, right, that's a good question, but I mean, we're seeing, Chris is right, I mean. The landowners are putting up gates. All over, more every year. And they're keeping them closed longer. I mean, as an example. I mean, we saw last fall, the area that in North Main Woods that was always, you could hunt moose and everything, and all of a sudden it was closed. And it was closed because the landowner had problems and he just got fed up and said, I'm just putting gates on the main roads. Warehouser kept the roads closed to the B-52 site. The only way you could go to the B-52 site Memorial Day weekend is by ATV. Because we fixed and opened the ATV trail. But the rest of it kept closed. The guys couldn't go into the ponds to go fishing or anything unless they walked miles and miles and miles. And it's all because they're done with the damage to the roads. They said, we're keeping the gates closed until they dry out. And to your question of mud season, that's a year-to-year thing. Some years it might be dry enough early May. Down east, that might be dry enough in April. There was roads they opened in April this year. There was roads in Aquasic that we still haven't opened. So, I mean, it's across, and the same thing's true on the ATVs. We've never had a marked season because it comes right down to, what's your land look like? What's the landowner saying? we want it still closed, somewhere else might be able to be open. And until those signs come down, it is considered closed. I've felt for years, there ought to be a similar law that applies to trucks, and as long as those signs are up, it's a minimum $500 fine if you're out there. At least you may still have people that disregard that, but you would.
Posting the roads for like frost, like
Right,
weight.
it's that same idea.
Like, like the towns maintain that, they go out and post their roads.
The municipal officers, which means in the town, the select board, or the town council, or the city. council,
Somebody
or the
with
city
authority.
Has the authority under state law to adopt an ordinance with regard to, usually town meeting has to do the ordinance or the town. But for these sorts of ordinance, traffic, minor ones, and the select board can post roads for seasonal closing, mud season. These are the dates. We're gonna post town ways. We're going to reduce, have weight limits. That can be done. And what you're suggesting is maybe we can do that for these public easements as well.
Well, right now, there are roads that are seasonally closed, right, and they're posted by the towns that way.
They're close to winter maintenance because no one lives on them and the town has voted, the town meeting has voted to close that portion of the road to winter maintenance. So that's a vote taken by the town. That's a different deal from we're going to post the roads, so no heavy trucks can use the road during mud season.
But does the town not have this authority under the same decision they used to say we're closing it to winter maintenance? Couldn't that same body say, we're also gonna, it's closed, right now it's closed. Some of them have dates on it. Couldn't they just make the decision that it's closed till May 15th or whatever they wanted and make it part of that sign?
Well,
They
It
can.
should be, it should be, because that's where a lot of the damage happens on, roads seasonally closed in the winter.
Rebecca,
it's-
they already have that as.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with you, Jim.
Yes, I believe that we do, because the public easement would be something that would qualify under that same
Right.
roads law. But the flip side of that is there's always a lot of pushback on municipalities when they do that. There's a ton of people that are screaming about just the posting of roads because it tends to also coincide, and it's becoming increasingly hard because of the wetter and wetter springs that we're having for logging trucks to even be able to operate.
And we're really, there are two doctrines colliding here, or two thoughts colliding here. A town closes a road or a portion of a road to winter maintenance because no one's living there and it's too darn expensive or difficult to maintain. You've got a steep road or whatever else, so we're gonna close it to winter maintenance. That means no one goes on that road. It's not being maintained by the town. Maybe you run a snowmobile or cross-country ski over it, but that's it. Whereas we're talking on the other side about preserving and protecting a road by putting weight limits on during mud season. You can do that anyway, but the idea of doing that for public easements, because Roberta's still gonna want to get to her road. Closing it completely to help preserve it doesn't help her get down the street, but keeping the truck off it to prevent the ruts from happening is going to help.
The problem though is Roberta's gonna buy a truck and then she can't get to her own place, just like Chris's wife or whatever else, so.
What a little truck won't get here.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
But, I do know of at least two cases where towns have closed a road to winter maintenance when there was still somebody living on it. And then the next thing they say is, oh, by the way, you can't plow it either because you can't use private equipment on a public road. So basically the person can't get to their house for several months in the winter. So it's a functional discontinuance for several months of the year, and that should require compensation.
The ultimate, you can't get here from here.
As far as posting roads during mud season, I believe they can post public easements to, heavy loads limited in the spring. The problem with that is that a lot of towns don't understand that there's a difference between when a discontinued road is ready to sustain traffic and when a paved road is ready. The paved roads, generally the trees are cleared back, so the sun gets to it, it warms it up, it dries it out, it firms up. And it's got pavement to protect it, but you get onto these discontinued roads, usually the trees are arching over it, they keep it shaded, and it takes a lot longer for it to thaw. So the town goes out and they says, oh, our roads are fine, and they take down the posting, and then everybody comes in and uses the discontinued roads that aren't ready for it yet.
I think Peter might have some insight into posting of roads and road realities.
So Title 29A talks about how DOT and towns and cities and counties can enact restrictions on public ways within their jurisdiction. So then you go to the definition of public way, and it says a way owned and maintained by the state, county, or town, over which the general public has a right to pass.
It's owned and maintained, so that kicks out the discontinued roads.
Well, they have the right to maintain it,
But they don't
and
own
the
it.
public has a right to pass, so doesn't that include public easements?
But they don't maintain it. It says owned and maintained.
Right, but they've chosen not to maintain it.
So doesn't that take them out of the protection of that law?
On many
You're
roads,
asking an engineer and attorney question.
Great answer. You're running for office next, right?
Yeah, it's like I keep telling people, I am not an attorney. I cannot interpret law. I cannot give legal advice. Whatever I say is my opinion. Take it or leave it for what it's worth.
I mean, the town owns an easement of passage over most roads, not a public easement, but just an ability for people to drive over it, the general public, and also to run utilities underneath.
Mhm.
That's what the town owns. Does it own the road? Probably not. The abutters probably own to the center line as far as the fee underneath the road. Unless it's a rangeway that was established by colonial proprietors and accepted by the town, or unless it's a newer street since 1976 that's been accepted in a subdivision. There's a presumption that the town owns the fee.
I think that goes back earlier. I think it goes to the 1950s.
To the state
I may be
51.
wrong. Yeah, maybe
But-
that's the same thing, yeah.
But that's, so for the most part, the town doesn't own the land, it owns a right of passage. Is that the ownership that's meant in the statute? God knows. I mean, it, you have a room full of lawyers and probably get a room full of answers. Different.
All I know is, to Roberta's point, most of the damage is happening when the road is soft. Some of that is hunting season, and that's a battle for sure, but a lot of it is spring of the year, and some of it's people intentionally mudding.
I mean,
They're trying to do
There's
damage.
discontinued roads right now that guys are gonna go down in mud and
Right.
tear it up, and it's 100 degrees out, and it's just, you can't stop that, because the roads weren't made for the vehicles that we drive nowadays.
Mm.
A lot of that has to do with that, where there's a horse and buggy trail. I mean, you talk about it growing in and not drying out, it's because there's not supposed to be a vehicle that goes through there. I mean, we see it all the time, people driving over alders and they drive right through them.
Mm.
Why are they doing that? It's just because they're,
Get to their moose.
yeah. I mean,
One of my favorite pictures that I got from the DOT website years ago is a picture of doing road maintenance on Route 1 in, I think it's 1914 or something like that. And it's a horse and a tip cart and several guys with shovels. If that's what Route 1 was then, in 1914, last record we can find of our road being maintained by the public was 1904.
It was a spade.
What was that road built for?
Now we know
Certainly not
why
for what we're
DOT
cutting
has a
now.
union, right? I don't know, it's a big debate, I mean, and the crazy part, my experience dealing with this from ATV and snowmobile side is that there are towns out there are places people put up gates to block the use of these roads, and the town told them, tear it down, because you can't stop the public, and then others, very similar situations, they've told people that everybody's gotta stay out, and then I've heard stories about people that the first person on the road is keeping everybody else out, and I don't see how you fix that without some concise state law that makes them all get treated the same.
The trouble is they aren't all the same, because they're the ones that people live on. and
If you
ones that
want a
don't.
law, you gotta quit saying that. That's my advice to you.
Hmm.
I could make that same argument on ATVs very easily.
Hmm.
Nothing happens unless you decide, I'm gonna look past that and let's do something that makes it better. Cause your argument is working against what you want.
Mhm. Well, one thing that you said earlier that I really picked up on was you said that the ATV people are paying to maintain these trails, and then they don't get to use them in the spring, and the four-wheel drive trucks do.
Well, in that case, they didn't.
Yeah, well, this this is very similar to the situation that the residents on these roads are in. They're paying to fix the road so that they
Right.
can get to their own house, and everybody else gets to use it for free, and they destroy what the person did. I forget which one of you it was, said you saw several infractions on there that,
That was correct.
that, you know, could have been cracked down on. Some of those pictures were way early. They're, the really muddy ones were in the 1980s. Some of them were, there's some recent ones too. So in some cases, maybe that didn't exist then. I don't know when the regulations went through, but in other cases, people have been reported and law enforcement comes and says, sorry, there's nothing we can do. I know even a few years ago, there was somebody else that was on the landowner relations program. It wasn't either of you.
Probably Rick or Dave.
Hmm?
Rick or Dave.
Yeah.
Rick will claim. The problem is, I'll stop you right there, Roberta, real quick. So ATVs are highly restricted. Motor vehicles are not.
Mhm.
So ATVs, we have all the teeth behind, because you have to have written permission or you have to be on an ATV trail. If you're off of those, you're fair game for us to go after. A motor vehicle, it's a lot more difficult. It's causing damage, it's criminal mischief.
Mhm.
We can deal with it that way, but they have the right to drive a vehicle there is always the
Hmm.
problem.
Anyway, this other person who shall remain nameless was going around telling people that all discontinued roads are open to ATVs. And that opened up some roads that shouldn't have.
Well, the
been
way the
open to
law was
ATVs.
written, it kind of was.
Yeah, that's the one.
And a
gets
lot of that
everybody-
got fixed.
Well, let's try to put all of this discussion and Roberta's slides in context so that we don't go too far off the road.
I do have one question for you, Roberta.
Yeah.
The people that are calling you, are they all landowners or need access on all these roads? Or is it more opinion based of, it's a shame they're tearing up the road?
No, the people who get in touch with me are the people who actually need the road for access to their property, whether they're residents or just landowners. Mostly it's
He's right,
residents.
Brian's right. If we could get an off-road,
Hmm.
shut it down for mud season, that would cure a lot of the abandoned.
I do have a
roads.
follow-up question to that though. The Kennebec Highlands, I'm super familiar with. They don't need to get in there.
That's not Kennebec Highlands.
What you showed was,
It's Kennebec Land Trust.
yeah, the Kennebec Land Trust. There's no reason for them to drive in there.
You mean the mud runners?
No, the
Right.
mud runners, absolutely, they're not, but the Kennebec Land Trust doesn't need to drive a motor vehicle in there either.
Okay.
He was asking if they needed access, that was
Oh.
what I was saying, like, they don't need access, they don't have a residence back there,
Yeah.
they have no reason to drive back there.
The only
No,
reason they
that's-
would get back there is because under the land trust conservation easements, probably they have an obligation to inspect.
You're right, but they can walk, like, I'm just saying.
That's true,
Yeah,
right.
they need to be able to maintain.
You could use a drone for that, for an inspection.
But I was just saying, like, they don't live back there.
Right.
No,
So the reason we're having this discussion, why we created the committee is that the legislature gave us a new task this year. And that is to ask us to talk about the scope of public use you allowed on a public easement over an abandoned or discontinued road. So what's the scope of public use that's allowed? What's the need or justification for each type of use? What's the impact of that public use on abutting property owners? And what are ways to reduce the negative impacts on abutting property owners? So we've kind of hit on a lot of these things, but what we tried to do in our discussion as a subcommittee, it's in the table that you have. And that is, let's break it out into, the 4 columns: types of use, need for use, the impact of the use, and solutions to minimize the adverse effects. So it's a matrix. Those are the 4 headings. That's what the legislature asked us to take a look at. So then we went down on type of use column. What are the types of use that we typically see for these discontinued?
do you want to see the other slide?
Well, we'll see let's just try to put it in context so that we understand what we're looking at and what we can try to do with that information. What are some of the types of use that people make of discontinued roads, abandoned roads, these public easements that are retained? Residential, so that people who need to get to and from their homes, whether it's their primary dwelling or whether it's a vacation home. Commercial, industrial, it could be that there's a business out there, an actual factory or industrial complex, someone's body shop or whatever. But it also could be that it's logging, that there's a forest area that needs to be logged up. Farm use, recreational uses. There could be camping, there could be hiking, there could be bicycling. It could be something organized. It could just be land that's set aside to go walking through. But so there's recreational uses, and people may be using their motorized bikes or ATVs to get there, snowmobiles, they may be truck mutters, they could be hunters. There are some folks who are using it because these public easements are open to public access. And so that means I can drive down there. I could drive down for a kegger in the woods. It could be for doing illegal dumping. I don't want to bring stuff to the landfill and have to pay per bag or per load. I just want to trash it in the woods. I don't want to have to take care of my old refrigerator. I'll just leave it on someone's property. And then there's the category of folks that Roberta had talked about and had been mentioned here, where people were following their GPSs and, you know, they're from New York and they wound up somewhere in a back road that doesn't really have any public rights. These are the types of uses. And if you have other ideas, categories of use or different definitions, please add them. Let us know. Let's do those.
I've
Steve,
got one for that. We happen to own a conservation easement on a town of Frenchville property, which is on a seasonal road. And it's right on the border of St. Agatha and Frenchville. There's residences like on the early end of the road, but the winter maintenance stops. And so we're in that category ourselves. People, it's open to the public. The easement is our conservation easement.
so I could hike, or I could hike or cross-country ski on that, or?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe we can include that within the category of recreation, because hiking is open.
But it's it's strictly for conservationist property. It's a no forestry easement. We've got restrictions on motorized traffic. We've got trails in there that are non-motorized. We have a section that is okay to go up to with motors. But, you know, we do have, you know, restrictions. We have strict restrictions on management of our fields and things like that. And yeah, we don't allow ATVs within the forest easement or the property easement. But one of our problems is either way you come, the road is terrible. It's in terrible condition because people drive it early in the year and during the winter if they can. And those pictures you showed, I mean, I could show you worse pictures from that road. And it's a public, you know, it's a public road, it's a road. But, you know, there's no standards as far as the upkeep. So effectively, the only people that would drive in that back road would be on a pickup truck anyway. You know,
Who does the maintenance on that?
well, it's town of Frenchville, but it's right on the border of St. Agatha. Literally, our property is the border of St. Agatha and Frenchville. You know, we've got 121 acres there.
Yeah.
But the town's maintaining the road, not you?
Right. Well, the only thing we're maintaining is the road. We've got a mini access road to a dark sky observatory we've established. And we maintain that, which is better maintained than the town road, but it's out in the willy wags, you know, so it's not, there's no electricity out there, and you know, the standards are not high. There's no money in it for repair, but we do have a problem with rutting and it's terrible, you know, this kind of thing.
Okay, so you have a public easement that provides access to conservation easements. And the public easement is maintained by the town, but becomes damaged because of truck ruts and what other types of damage?
Yeah, it's primarily, you know, vehicles, the four-wheel drive vehicles, pickup trucks and things like that, that do most of the damage. You know, there's an ATV access that does not go right to that point. So we don't see ATVs there, comes close to there, but no. In theory, we do accept ATVs onto the property, up our little spur road to our high ground observatory location. But that's it. Yeah, so we don't see much of that, but just the vehicular traffic, myself included. I mean, I went early this year. I checked with the town and I said, is the road open back there? Oh yeah, we went the other day and I went and I shouldn't have gone. After going through there, I said, oh shit. That's, excuse my language, it was not, you know, not good. So it's like that. It's a road standard thing.
Well, it's a road standard thing, but it's also when the road is being used by what kinds of vehicles.
You're right.
would a seasonal closing of
Yes.
that public easement, as Brian suggested, and, you know, others have thought, not a bad idea. Is that something that would help to preserve that road?
I think it would. I actually do think it would. Not the easiest thing to enforce, you know, but it would help things, I'm sure, you know.
Would it be a closing or a weight limit?
More weight limit, I would think.
No.
I'm telling you, like this, when I've got a little Xterra, you know, a smaller sport utility type thing, and you know, it doesn't matter what you drive through there with. You could drive through with a car if you had good speed in the low lying areas, but no, it's not good.
Weed's not gonna handle it. I
And
mean, they're all,
there was still frost, I think, under the ground, you know what I mean? And yeah, I think a more strict time of year restriction would be much better.
Okay,
Can you make an exception for respectful use by residents?
well, that's, for every public easement that is in your category, Steve, where hardly anybody uses it for residential access.
Right.
Mhm.
There are public easements where people now have built and live, and they need to get access no matter what. So would you make an exception for residents on the road? Year round?
I would say so, especially if they're, you know, the thing is, if they live a mile down the road and they're gonna ruin the road for a mile, you know, that's a problem. Like I know some, like we've talked about this before, and that's an awkward time of year. Might be better to give them ATV access than a truck access, for example, during a sensitive period, because I think just ATVs would have less pounds per square inch in the tire, and if you're going carefully and if you're the landowner trying to get there, just like in the winter, they might, if it's no snow removal, they might use a snow sled, park the car there and use a sled to go to their house. You know, I know a few people like that, but I don't have any specific recommendations there, but I think it's reasonable to allow the residents to be able to go to their house, you know.
What happens if they need an oil truck?
Yeah, that's where they should, every
Yeah.
chance we get, when we find somebody new that's moving in onto one of these roads, we tell them, here are some things you need to plan on.
Buy
You need
two
to
oil
plan
tanks.
before mud season hits, you need to stock up on anything heavy that you don't want to walk in carrying. So you stock up on fuel, you stock up on animal feed, you stock up on whatever.
Yeah. And I think the Maine Municipal Association would have a keen interest in this too, because and any community like here in Frenchville and the surrounding community, St. Agatha, whatever, there's lots of spreading landscape, you know, agricultural fields like where we got our easement. And there's opportunity for somebody to buy, hey, let's buy that old farmhouse and, you know, or whatever, or just buy the land and put a little structure up on it. And then the expectations on services come with it. And that's where it gets really expensive for the town, more than, and the increase in the mill, you know, what they get from taxes does not offset that, not relatively speaking. So we all know that's a big issue. And it is one, like I agree, that people should know what they're getting into when they buy something, and the community should be upfront with people on what they will and will not do for somebody moving out in the willy wags.
Yeah, this is where, when the real estate disclosure laws went through a few years ago, that said that the seller has to notify the buyer if the road is not maintained by the public. That was great, because instead of getting calls from people saying, I just bought this piece of land, now I'm told the road is discontinued. What does that mean? Now I get calls from people saying, I'm looking at a piece of property, they tell me the road is discontinued. What does that mean? And that gives me a chance to make sure that they know ahead of time what they're getting into. And maybe it's a perfect match. Maybe they want a little cabin out in the middle of nowhere and they're willing to walk in during mud season. But if that's not what they're expecting, if they're expecting that the town is going to maintain the road, that's not what they're going to get. On top of that, one of the things that often happens on these roads is, you said somebody coming in buying an old farmhouse or something. You have somebody that has a very limited income, and I'm going to say, for just to make the figures easy, say somebody whose annual income is $20,000 per year. There are people that live on that. And they find this piece of land that I can actually afford to buy the land here and haul in a camper or build a little cabin or get one of these prefab little tiny houses or something, and I can move in there and have my place that's my own where I can actually live. But they don't realize that the road isn't going to stay in the shape that it was when they first saw it. When they start fixing it up, everybody else says, oh, look, we can use this road now, and they start using it. And here's where, Brian, you said something about, ATVs don't want to be excluded from the road that they're paying to maintain. Well, the same thing happens with these people. They're paying to maintain the road, and all of a sudden, everybody else is using it and wearing it out. And that's where the objections come in. They wouldn't mind so much if they were maintaining it just for their own use, but it's when everybody else gets to use it on their dollar. And when it takes you, say, $2,000 a year to maintain the road, and you're only making $20,000 a year, that's 10% of your income going to road maintenance for somebody else's benefit. And that's where people really get irate about it. And I think rightly so.
So when we were having our committee meeting, one of the suggestions Roberta had, particularly with regard to commercial, industrial, farm use, where there could be heavy trucks using these public easements, was to have a bond posted. But if there are instead, if the municipal officers could pass an ordinance that would say this public easement is closed except for residents during the period from, they can set it each year. Maybe it's February 1 through May 30th or something, Memorial Day.
Well, until it's firm.
Well, okay.
If Ethan or Rebecca can probably answer, I mean, when you're posting the roads for overweight trucks, it's due to temperature, correct?
Yeah, it's weight and temperature.
Yeah.
So like, if we went along those lines of like a temperature gradient, like, and starting to like, wait till it dries out, so cause it's not firming up and just shut it down in the springtime.
There's one thing that would really help as far as the heavy loads limited go. Currently, I believe it says that it's okay for them to haul with heavy loads as long as the temperature is below 32 degrees. But if it's been warm all night and then it drops to 32 just before dawn,
That's been changed, Roberta.
has it?
Yeah.
Good. What's it been changed?
Well, it's been changed in the DOT rule. It's not changed in the statute.
Okay.
DOT changed it probably 10 years ago. So now it not only talks about below 32, but it talks about any open water or unfrozen water. Yeah, in other words, if everything's frozen around it, grass is frozen, sidewalks frozen, it's still frozen road, even though there may be water sitting and running down the road, it's still considered frozen.
What we need is something that says if it's solidly frozen down so many inches or something to that effect.
Well, but
You're not
that
really
wouldn't help
sure.
you at all, because right now it doesn't apply to your road.
Well, this,
Rebecca had a.
Rebecca?
Raised at one point.
My hand was up just to say that there is an exemption on all of the postings for oil trucks and farm
Right.
feed
Right.
already. So even posting it won't keep those off a road under existing authority. Can you go back and ask your question again?
which,
Well, I was wondering too, Rebecca, like I know that you said like, there's a lot of pushback already just on posting the roads. Is that due to a shortage in the workforce, or is it like, just cause it's hard to manage? And what would be the overall consensus you think from your group as to like posting those roads with easements as the municipality?
Well, the posting of the roads piece comes from the people that use the roads. So it comes from the industry, it comes from the people who live along the roads. They're the ones pushing back.
Okay, I
Against
thought you were
posting.
saying all these were.
No.
Yeah, so municipalities have that authority now, and they do that quite frequently. And unfortunately, like the seasonal issues, like this season, I know at least in my community, there were roads that never froze.
Yeah.
It was a constant flow. So it really does have to have that flexibility. When you're thinking about seasons, it might need to be about conditions in general. It's not necessarily going to be, January to, February or January to March might be the typical season, but now increasingly it's in December. You'll have these thaws that that come out and they'll start posting and everyone pushes back against that. Because it keeps shortening the forestry season. I'm sure Carly can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, these days the forestry season is shorter because of the weather that we have, so,
Right.
um,
And there's actually some towns that have taken out the term solidly frozen, which I don't recommend they do, because now if some town puts up a sign in December because we got a soft winter, that basically says as long as the sign goes up and it stays up until April, doesn't matter whether the thing's frozen or not, you can't drive that truck on this road during the winter. When it's solidly frozen, it's the best time to do it.
Right.
But some of them have just taken it out because on the fringe ends of the season, it becomes difficult to determine, well, is it solidly frozen or not? You know, I don't want to make that decision, it's a pain in the butt. So we'll just take the term out, which to me makes it even worse for the economy.
Well, you're-
And especially since like the disturbed road service, it's gonna absorb sunlight more anyway, right? And it's gonna be warmer on the very surface, even on a cold day, potentially if it's sunny, right?
Yeah, you also have to keep in mind that the people that are posting the roads are usually the road commissioner who's contracted by the town. And given that authority to post the roads, it's not necessarily the select board members who are also part-time, but again, there's a part-time element there. So yeah, going with the easiest route of saying, all right, it's very clear that this road is not passable and posting it because there is this thaw out is a lot easier than having to pay someone to maintain and check it daily. Because those conditions do change on many of those roads daily. So they try to do the seasonal pace.
Yeah, and this past winter was the first winter I ever remember that, like, for example, we never had 2 feet of snow on the ground all winter. And a lot of it, there was like, you could have driven that all winter with a 4x4 truck, those roads. So it's a new thing, like not to have really deep snow.
The other side of that is that you can get around a posting if you're a forester. It's something that they hate because they have to go to each individual community, but you can bond. You can say, okay, I'm going to go this and I will bond to take care of any damage that I do for this road. But that's the path, that's the opportunity for them to get around that posting. Otherwise, it's just best to limit.
In fact, Roberta, that's in your model ordinance. That's the way it's written, is that there has to be a bond requested. And most towns don't even do that, even though it's in their ordinance. But it says it right in there. The other question, Jim, that we were talking about, and Chris, you just asked about, does the town have the right to post a public easement? And we talked about that in the law here 10 minutes ago. But Jim, in your report from January, where we talked about terms, and you actually said in here, in parentheses, under the term public way, which is the one I read, you said, there is, however, an open question whether a public easement, where there is a public right to pass and municipal government has the right to maintain, but not the obligation, is a public way.
Yeah,
So we said it there.
right.
So that, maybe if there's one thing that we could come out of this is somehow change this so that the word owned is not in there. And we go back and give municipal officers the authority to post anything within their jurisdiction, which is open to the public.
Or you amend public way to say, that, in any event, it also includes the term public easement.
Yes.
And
Right.
that way we don't have to split hairs.
Right.
Uh,
I don't know how many towns are actually gonna do that, because public easements usually are from discontinuances, which means they don't care about the road anymore. So I don't know if many of them have actually gonna post them anyway, but we can try.
If you had a law that allowed it to be posted. You could say something like, posted for mud season other than for residential access, let's say. Then the people who live on the road, in theory, if you live there, in theory. You're gonna be smart enough not to damage your own road, so you're gonna try to play a little bit smarter, and we can't fix everything, but if we can at least keep the rest of us from going out there, whatever our intent is.
Right.
That's gonna eliminate the biggest portion of your problem, and that's gonna make it easy for enforcement on one aspect, because if you don't live there, you can't be there during this time, that's an easy ticket.
Yeah, the violation for ATVs is operating ATV on temporarily closed trail.
What's the fine?
There isn't one, that's the point. We have a particular, fine is $500. The sign, they made me develop a sign when they adopted the law, so it's an established sign that they're all, and that's what it's good. If you write on a piece of cardboard, that don't work. You gotta have one of those state signs, and that puts it up, and until we take it down, it has to be put up by either the landowner or the club or state staff and taken down accordingly. And it made a huge difference. It really
It
did.
stops them in their tracks.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like that
you're
idea.
gonna have a few here and there, but it's pretty good. I mean.
What does it say again?
It says, stop trail closed due to saturated soils. And then it has either is a date that it's closed until or closed until removed.
It's a big red sign, white lettering, and it has a spot in there for the date, so the club can put on the date as to when it's gonna open. Typically, it will say until mud season.
Typically, what we either do is don't put a date or we put a late date.
Yeah.
Like I'll put June 1st on them. We may tear them down
Right.
this
Yeah.
year. A lot of
So
them
it's-
open May
Gives
19th.
us leeway.
But we learned the hard way. We don't put May 15th on any of them anymore because it may not be ready on May 15th, right?
And what's the violation called?
It's operate ATV on temporarily closed trail.
Temporarily closed trail.
So it refers to saturated soils and the law does, but I mean, we've used them. The norm is the spring, but we've used them in the fall too.
Yeah, I mean, we've had
Last year, we shut the
winters
season down early because of it.
where we don't have snow going into the season and the trails are still closed during typically hunting season. It'll be posted because there's no snow, so like a lot of rail beds.
Right, if it doesn't get froze up, I mean, we may leave rail beds open because of the way they're built, but a lot of the others won't be. Can I just as an aside, but part of this table, when I looked at this, I got confused. It seems like the top of, it says types of use should actually be over where need for access, and need for access should be where types of use. Because recreational access is not a type of use, ATVing is a type of use.
No, recreation is a type of use, and then the need for access is to get.
Those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah, the types of use are just residential, and then the need for access for residential use is to get there from here. You know, in so many instances, people have built on discontinued roads or abandoned roads. They don't have a deed. They don't have deeded access because there once was a public way. So there's no reason to put that in the deed. But now they need to get from here to there. And that's one reason why a public easement is retained
Right.
on discontinuance or abandonment. So the people who own property along there can get there because they don't have the deeded access. That's one reason. That's a positive. Another reason is if you say that there's still a public right of access, including the abutters, you don't have to pay the abutters as much for damages for taking part of their property because you've just taken a public right of a public road, maintained at public expense to their house. The public one now only has the right, but not the obligation to maintain it. So you've diminished the property value. That's the reason for the damages, Roberta, not to compensate for the amount of money it will cost an abutter to maintain that road from here on out. So you were concerned about, well, geez, I have to put in a new culvert, I have to do all this, and I've only been paid damages once. Well, you only get paid damages once because the government now has said they're not responsible for that road, we'll pay you once. It could be only dollar damages because you still have a public access and takes the place of a deeded access. I've
Except
heard
that-
all this,
Except that if it's no longer passable, it doesn't really provide you with access.
and that would be your comeback, and I understand. So you
I
can see
guess-
how this all goes.
My question is, are we trying to make a law to help the people that are still required to access this and protect the 300, 400,000 people? Are we trying to make a law to keep the 80,000 people that shouldn't be there in the first place? And it seems like that Brian's idea of, let's keep them out of there and let the residential people kind of sort through their
Well,
all
That
issues.
would certainly help.
the thing is that so long as it's still a public easement with a public right of access, 80,000 people still have the right theoretically to go over. You and I have the right to drive over it.
Correct.
It doesn't mean I'm going to.
The public easement, so does that prevent it from being closed for mud season?
You can reasonably regulate the road to protect it. And you certainly, that's. Municipalities have this argument every spring.
Yeah.
I'm a trucking company. I do business in 5 towns. 2 of them close it and I can't get to where they're open because of that. I can't get through, because I've got a 30,000-pound truck and I can't get through insert name of town to get to where my customers are. That's unconstitutional. It's illegal. Well, it's not illegal. You have a reasonable right to regulate road usage in order to protect the road. But these arguments happen every spring, right?
I'd like to see a trucking company go through those roads.
Yeah, I know. I know. But that's for the roads we use every day, the streets, the roads that you're trying to maintain. Same argument happens on the public easement side, although it's less likely a truck's going to be going down, as Chris says. Well, we're trying, these public easements are used primarily by the people who live there, but they are open to the public. Some of them are maintained by the town, and the town has an interest in trying to maintain what it has done. Some of them are maintained by the abutters, and the abutters have an interest in making sure that the work that they've put in, the money that's spent, remains. So in either event, if we put together something that allows the municipality to adopt an ordinance to close seasonally for mud season, not to winter maintenance, but to close or post these roads, these public easements, and just make clear that existing law allows for it if there's a case for that. Just clarify that can be done as a way to protect it. So it protects it whether Roberta and David are maintaining the road or whether the town of Fayette's maintaining a road. Oh, that's a public easement. So is that, and then there will be the exceptions for forestry, if the bond is posted. For people who live there, oil trucks, yes, that was put in during the King administration. Fine, but does that sound like a road this commission wants to go down?
I think it's worth looking into.
Okay. Who wants to try drafting the changes?
You're the attorney.
Yeah, well, I'm not the. Vivian isn't here.
Tough way to ask that.
Okay, well, I think we've defined where we want to go with it.
I mean, the question, I thought I understood Rebecca to say the authority is already there.
Well, let's
Isn't
take
that
a
what
look.
you-
So, Jim, I'm looking at 38, which 3009 is the one that
Yeah, I don't
talks
have
about
it.
traffic
Yeah.
ordinances, exclusive authorities, municipal
Yep.
officers. It does say the municipal officers may regulate the operation of all vehicles in the public ways, that term again,
Mm-hmm,
and on publicly owned property,
mm-hmm,
which might mean the park.
right.
But couldn't a publicly owned property be the public easement?
Well,
They
I
don't
would say
own
yes.
land.
the town doesn't own the land, the town,
Well, okay, let's ignore the term, the argument about owned versus an easement. Okay,
You own an easement?
but let's say it was public, instead of saying the word owned, and on public property. Would that include a public easement?
maybe let's make it clear.
That's what I'm suggesting.
So maybe you could just amend that law and
Well,
add
that's what I'm saying, that might
publicly
be,
owned or public easement,
Yeah.
and then they would have the authority,
What
right?
section is that again?
383009. Now I'm starting to sound like an attorney.
yeah, that's, there are certain ordinances that can be adopted by the select board, and that's one.
30A 3009.
Yep.
If they don't post it, no action.
So that's something we can work on.
Yeah.
So what we do then is, with the input this commission's given today, we'll talk about updating the chart, adding on the conservation easement piece, and also some of the focus on some of the impacts. And Roberta can show the next set of slides, but I think this has been instructive to show us what these things look like and what we're trying to protect roads from. And then we've got an idea now of how we can try to reduce those impacts. And if it's something that we all can agree on, it sounds like it. It sounds like everybody's protected and we get to, and the roads are protected. If we can get there, then that would be our first big achievement.
Yeah.
Rebecca has her hand raised.
Rebecca, you're telling me you want to try drafting?
She already wrote it.
Delegate. I can draft something. However, I just want to note that the posting of roads isn't going to prevent the types of trucks that are doing the damage to those easements. And that might be important to think about, because the posting of roads really deals with heavy vehicles, multi-wheeled vehicles. So pickup trucks, it's not gonna apply. So if someone wants to do that kind of behavior, it doesn't change that.
Well, that's why I was thinking this is more like closing a road to winter maintenance. You're closing a road to mud season travel, not posting, but closing, and which is different than what's allowed by statute right now.
Temporarily closed.
Yeah,
I mean,
temporary closing.
Currently, statute allows you to close it for winter, correct?
Right.
So what we would need is take that section and say allows you to close it for winter maintenance and mud season or mud season or whatever, however you want to put it. That would be a complete closure, but have an exception in there for residents.
Right.
What about property owners?
It would be allowed.
I say property owners.
Be allowed, well, certainly you want residents, people who have a home on there to be able to get to and from. And then the oil truck that's needed if needed. Then the question becomes foresters and whatever there is for protection right now for closing the winter maintenance or posting, we want to carry over. But that would be whatever the bond requirements are there.
I agree too, though. Anybody with land in there should be, because they may not have a house, they may have a woodlot in there.
But
Well,
I'm gonna take my pickup truck and go there, and that's the evil you're trying to avoid.
I know, but they own the land in there.
But, yeah, and I own the land that's close to winter maintenance too. If it's close to winter maintenance, I'm not gonna get through the 6 feet of snow that's built.
Well, could you?
Plowed.
can you?
I think the guy that.
Can you right now plow in there if you own it, if it's close to winter
No.
maintenance?
No,
You can't.
No, because you
So
can,
if you were consistent, you would say it's closed.
that's right.
I mean, honestly, you can answer this better, but my experience is the wood company is not gonna be the issue, because they're closing down. They were closed longer than the roads were posted. They closed down before and actually till later. But what I've seen in Thorndike are the farmers. They're trying to get out on the fields. And they're hauling, typically, they're not hauling trucks, but in some cases they are. They're spreading liquid fertilizer with fairly heavy loads.
Or the maple syrup producers.
I would not want to stop a load of maple syrup.
I'm just saying, but like, that's a woodlot, not a residence.
Yeah,
So I feel that somebody that has a woodlot in there, that's a maple syrup grower or any type of, they have just as much of a right to get back there as Roberta, who lives on that road.
well, maybe, but the problem is the type of vehicle they're going to be using is more likely to damage the road
If
than,
they drive a half-ton pickup like Roberta does, it's no different.
okay. Now we're at weight limits.
can they do the,
No, I'm just saying, it's a pickup truck. It's a, like,
can they do the posting of the bond? Like the loggers,
so are you gonna post a bond because you're going over it to go to your residence?
but I'm only using.
Yeah, there's no difference. That's what they're gonna tell you.
You need the use of it just like they do. So you have just as much of a responsibility. You can cause damage during the mud season. If you need to use it, they should have to, like,
Well,
it's.
Most of the pulp and paper company or timber companies, they're not harvesting wood in the spring, right? And they're probably not,
Right.
You know what I mean? There with saps running, you don't cut trees in the spring, and like generally speaking, I don't think, and when it's wet like that. But you know, so I think if you did have a sugary or you had a good purpose where you had to be there for your business, that's one thing, but just because you got a wood lot out there doesn't mean you necessarily should be able to ruin the road.
Well, and again, if I've got trees tapped under a lease that's 20 years or 25 years, and I go out there, despite what all the device is, and I trash the road, how am I gonna go out there next year?
Right.
You're not gonna do that. I think if you pass the law and allow the residents, you're gonna resolve most of the problem, because the guy that seemingly is the problem, who's the one that's just out there, has nobody can do anything. They
When you're
just out
saying
mud.
You're saying resident, do they have to have a structure?
Well, not,
Right.
I'm saying
abutting
someone with a
landowner.
residential dwelling.
Yeah,
Say that again?
that's what I thought. You're
Yeah,
saying
someone who
residential
lives
dwelling.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's not gonna work for our members.
Okay. So the forestry truck needs to be there, the agricultural truck.
I think
needs
an
to be
abutting
there.
landowner,
I agree.
I think you gotta let the landowners, I mean, if they are fighting amongst themselves, then sorry, but at some point. You gotta sort that out yourself. All we're gonna have any chance at doing is keeping the general public at bay.
That's your problem, is the general public. It's like, it's not the guy that owns the 40-acre woodlot past you that wants to go in seasonally. I mean, I think there's an understanding there that you guys all have playing the card in the game.
And isn't that what Rebecca's saying is not gonna happen? That,
Well, it would happen if you wrote it under the same law that allows for.
Road posting.
Discontinued, non-maintenance in the winter or non-closed in the winter or whatever. If you had that same thing for mud season, that would stop everything. The road posting is gonna be a weight limit, and then you could still go.
Jim, I also noted something in here too that you had under the need for access under hunters and solutions and minimizations.
Yeah,
There was landowner permission was in there.
right.
And that would be like where I would refer to that as reverse posting, cause like in Maine, you don't have to have access in order to go on land unless it's posted. So like I guess, was that a statement that they would be required to have landowner permission in order to go over a public easement?
That was the concept that was floated.
Cause that would be reverse posting.
Yeah,
Well, there's-
right.
There's kind of a difference between whether somebody is walking into hunt or whether they're driving into hunt.
Well, that was kind of why I brought that other up, because you list hunters, but you don't say trucks or SUVs. I mean, honestly, you ought to, instead of hunters, you should put trucks or SUVs, or you should say hunters and trappers and fishermen and everything else, because you're kind of categorizing hunters in a different, where the real issue is the pickup, right? You're not concerned, if the hunter is walking up in the upper category, no big deal.
But also at the same, I will say from an enforcement perspective, like a road that they're legally allowed to drive down unless posted otherwise, which you can't post it as no trespassing, because the public has a right to go through there. You can't stop them from going in there to hunt.
No, you can't unless the property is posted.
Correct.
Right.
We've said for years, people are willing to, people are welcome to come in and hunt, but they're not welcome to come in and just drive up and down the road. We call them
But you
beater
can't stop
hunters.
that.
They're the ones who sit in their truck and think they're gonna get a deer without getting out of their truck.
There's so many that are successful, it's crazy. I don't know how to-
Wild deer, huh?
I've never done it.
But he's right, I mean, there's no way you're gonna fix that
Can't
here,
enforce that.
unless you literally could say that they can't be there at all, but.
That's what, they're successful because there's roads everywhere, right? So the animals don't have too many places to hide anymore.
Okay. We'll try another pass on this table, but it was just to get the discussion going. And I think it's been a good one. I think we've got some direction here we can work toward. And we'll just try to sort out the details to make sure that, access is available then for anybody who's a landowner abutting the road. Right?
And then,
Otherwise closed.
I think you're correct, Brian, that, mostly the people who are landowners are gonna be pretty responsible about how they use the road because they wanna be able to use it again next year.
Right,
There are exceptions. I think there are fewer exceptions now than there were in the 1970s, when, in the 1980s, when I had some of those awful pictures of our road. That logger figured they were gonna take all their trees and leave, and they didn't have any need to come back for the next 20 years.
All right, so let's go with slideshow 2,
Okay.
Roberta, and then we'll move on to subcommittee 2.
Okay, residential access or ATV trail, conflicting purposes. A couple bought a farm horse which the seller had accessed via another discontinued road on the other side. The real estate disclosure said it was a private road with maintenance shared by the abutters. Then an owner of land on both sides of that road put up a gate arguing that no easement was retained when it was discontinued, and that the new residents have access via this public easement. But use by ATVs has left it badly rutted, washed out, and holding water. Does this provide adequate access for a resident? Photo taken May 27th, 2022.
just for the record, that's a truck, ruts, those aren't ATVs. That middle track is ATV, but those
Yeah,
side
Yeah,
ones
the
are
one that
pickup.
I was looking at was the middle track here. So
Is
there's
that
both.
Whitefield? Is that Whitefield? Is that where that is?
No.
And that's sensitive, sensitive fern on the side, which means it's wet.
Yeah,
Next slide.
That's not an ATV trail.
no,
Okay, some of these roads are lovely hiking trails, a place to walk the dog. This is Surrey Road in Wayne and Fayette, fall of 2022. Or is it for use by four-wheel drive? And this is the same road. Or is it a Jeep trail? Surrey Road, June 2024, after use by mud runners, no longer a pleasant place to walk. Residential or ATV, farm or snowmobile. After someone purchased an off-grid cabin in Oxford County, the ATV club replaced a bridge on the discontinued road with one too narrow for fuel deliveries, emergency access, etc. Another discontinued road in Kennebec County had been used for years by the farmer who owned the back land for access to his back fields. Then the snowmobile club put in a bridge that wouldn't hold his equipment, forcing him to take his tractors a long route around on busy roads.
so can we just talk about that?
Yeah.
Cause the reality of both of these scenarios is this. The clubs had permission to use them. The bridges that they replaced wouldn't even hold snowmobiles and ATVs. The landowners wouldn't put any money into them, so they replaced them to handle snowmobiles and ATVs, and you're blaming them. And yet, what was there wouldn't hold any one of them, and they wouldn't help. They could have co-funded it and they would have got a product that wouldn't have held them. They refused to do any of that, so they got a product that wouldn't hold them, which replaced a product that wouldn't hold them. My argument is, I'll work all day long on you on cost sharing, but don't tell me that I gotta build you a 100,000-pound capacity truck bridge with ATV money or snowmobile money. If you want to cost share, that's fine. What was replaced, they couldn't cross. What's there, they can't cross. It's very unfair to be blaming us for that. We didn't do anything wrong.
In this situation, the person who bought the cabin was told that it was a private road with maintenance shared by the abutters. I have a big beef with that law because it's been abused ever since that went in. It's Title 23, Section 3121. And it's been abused all over the place. People claiming that, oh yeah, it's a private road with maintenance shared by the abutters, when it's not. It's not a private road. It's actually a discontinued road. It's a public easement. And the abutters have no intention of sharing the maintenance on it. In this one, there were 4 abutters. One was a logging company who had finished their logging and had no more need for the road. And they put the property up for sale. One of them was a scout camp that hadn't visited their property in probably 10 years. They had no reason to want to rebuild it. The third one was the town. And they had no intention of putting any money into the road. So you got this one guy who's being asked to maintain the road for everybody else. And I don't know if he was even contacted by the ATV clubs.
He's the one who reached out to us, telling us to rebuild it so that he could get his cement trucks across.
Okay,
So, you know, I'm not playing ball that way. I am more than happy to cost share. But when you come in and tell me that I've now gotta spend $25,000 or $30,000 to build a bridge that wasn't there before, so that you can now build your house.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's an
Okay.
improper use of snowmobilers, ATVers money.
I understand what you're saying
And
because
that's
that's,
what went on, and it's still going on in
Okay.
places, and we're saying, no, look. If they want us to cost share a road or bridge or whatever with them, we're all over it.
Mhm.
But we can't build their road or their bridge or your road or your bridge entirely out of ATV funds or snowmobile funds. So what we ended up doing was built what worked for snowmobiles and ATVs. This guy's unhappy because he's like, well, I don't have the money to do it either. And I understand that. We should have figured that out before you bought the land.
And you guys cost
yeah,
share
see,
all the
this is where
time.
he was misled by the seller who told him that.
Well, that may be, but I mean, that's, yeah, we cost share
No.
regularly, and I mean, we just had meetings 2 weeks ago with Wagner, we're gonna. Try to reconnect some of those trails in Western Maine, and they're gonna be cost shares on actual truck bridges, because it makes 0 sense for you. If I take your truck bridge out and put an ATV bridge in that you can't use, right? But it also makes 0 sense for me to take out a truck bridge and put back a truck bridge when all I need is ATVs. But if we work together, or ATVs,
Yeah.
snowmobiles and then all of a sudden we're cost sharing these bridges, which cost $30,000 or $40,000, but it's 10 grand out of each pot.
Mhm.
I can
Okay,
justify
here's-
that.
Here's where I absolutely understand what you're saying, because this is exactly what we've seen with the private landowner who needs a road that he can get in with his Subaru in dry season, and he's willing to walk during mud season. And all of a sudden, he's being told that because other people need the road, including logging operations, the public, boony cruisers, people who just want to drive through as a shortcut, he's being told he needs to build a road that will stand up to that kind of use. Which is much more
Right.
expensive than what he needs for just being able to get in with his Subaru. So I understand exactly what you're saying. It's the same battle that we've been having, because instead of spending $1,000 a year to maintain the road for us, we're now spending $2,000 a year, and it's not enough. The road is deteriorating.
Right.
The
No, I
$1,000 a
understand.
year is making the road better every year. $2,000 a year with everybody else using it isn't even keeping up.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're
No,
saying.
I mean, and that's why for years now, on these discontinued road stuff, I keep telling people, told the club that just recently, I said, I don't even wanna hear the fight. Let's assume these two abutters have different outlooks on the road, just make them both happy. What do we need to do? One wants gravel, the other wants culverts, one wants brush, and fine, let's just do it all to make them happy, so we've got permission to use, because with all due respect, paying money to go to court and a bunch of lawyers to fight this out is way more
Yeah.
expensive, so let's just get along.
Mhm.
And as long as everybody participates, you can turn
Mhm.
fairly significantly expensive projects and make them manageable. Cause a $50,000 bridge, we just met with Wagner last week, and they were like, we haven't got the money, and I don't have the money, but what if we all get together on this? What if we reroute the snowmobile trail and the ATV trails are on the same road, and we'll all cost share this, and the county will step in? All of a sudden now, instead of any one of us paying 50 grand,
Mhm.
we gotta come up with 12,500 each.
Mhm.
Well, that I can do.
Yeah, well, it's like.
And that's the kind of thing that needs to happen, but unfortunately, people's personalities get in the way, and I've seen it recently with town people who don't wanna deal with requirements that the new people from afar are trying to push, and vice versa, and all of that, and I get it. But in the big scheme of things, a lot of these things could be resolved with a little bit of common sense and trying to get along.
Yeah, it's like we've told our town, if you'd let us just keep other people off it, let us put up a gate. Oh, no, that's a public easement.
Well, and you're right, if it is a public easement, then that doesn't.
But if you've got one person putting in $2,000 and you've got a town with 2,000 people who are saying, it's gonna raise our taxes if you make us fix that road. Well, can't they each put in $1 and we'll have our $2,000?
That's a town meeting story, isn't it?
But then, of course, somebody gets up and says, well, if you maintain that road, I want you to maintain
Right,
my
no.
private road. Well, private road isn't the same as a public easement, and they don't understand that. Or they'll say, well, we'll have to bring the entire road up to town road standard. It's gonna cost us $1 million. We're not asking for town road standard. We're asking for passable, except during mud season, and we'll walk then. This is where I keep saying we need mediators. I'm wearing this shirt today because, last month I had the pleasure of giving a talk to the agricultural mediation program. And just last week, I gave a talk to the Maine Association of Mediators. They're both very well received. They're very enthusiastic about it. If we could get people, like you said, get people together and work out what their differences are. What do you need? What do I need? How can we meet in the middle? How can we fix it so that it works for everybody? Instead of having people just at each other and, you know, lawsuits that end up paying the attorneys and maybe both sides lose and no money goes into the road. You know, there are better ways of doing that. If we can get the mediators up to speed on taking on some of these issues, the style of mediation that these two organizations do, it's a little bit different from what I've seen in, for example, the cadres program, the court-appointed alternate dispute resolution. It seems to me that what they do is they listen to both sides and then they decide what you're going to do about it. What these mediators do is they listen to both sides, they get each side to listen to the other side, they try to find things that they can agree on, and then they work from there to try to bring them together, and they're very good at what they do. And they don't have a decision at the end unless the people agree on it. They don't say, well, neither of you likes it, but this is what it's going to be. They say, okay, do you like this or not? If you don't like it, well, we tried, at least maybe we've restored the relationship. Anyway,
Back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yes. Okay, let's see, okay, residential, ATV or commercial, Bowling Hill Road and Liberty, access to seasonal and year-round residences was destroyed by ATVs and by a commercial blueberry grower coming in with a tractor during mud season. Now, here's where you would think that they would want to preserve it for next year, but apparently they didn't. Areas like this prevented access to a brush fire, we'll get the slides of that in a minute, and the runoff dump silt into Lake St. George. I showed that slide on the other one.
But the commercial blueberry grower is going into his property.
Mm-hmm. So why did he leave the road in such a mess? Doesn't he want to be able to use it again?
He's doing his work.
Anyway, yeah, and I agree. There are things like you said, maple sugaring. You have to get your work done in spring. What are you gonna do? Emergency access. This is actually a private road, but it kind of illustrates the point. Emergency access can be a problem. Sending a plow truck ahead of the fire truck will probably be too late to save a home. In this case, it was a private road, but conditions on discontinued roads are likely to be even worse due to use by those who do not contribute to maintenance. If the issue is mud, not snow, a plow truck won't help. Brush fire on Bowling Hill Road, Liberty. Trucks couldn't get close to the fire due to mud. I believe the story was that one truck went in and got stuck, and after that, they couldn't get the rest of the trucks in. On Young Road in Fayette, fire trucks have twice tried to respond to structure fires on the north end of the road by entering from the south, and had to backtrack and go another 7 miles because there's a half-mile public easement that no one maintains. Same thing has happened on the same road twice with ambulance calls to the north end of the road. Ambulance calls to 3 different homes on the south end of the road, including one in winter and one in mud season, have been successful only because the resident in the 4th home has kept that end of the road passable at private expense. Title 12, Section 9602 prohibits obstruction of discontinued woods roads that can be used for fire suppression. But what if public use and the absence of public maintenance have made the road impassable? Maine Roadways has had a booth at several MEMA and county emergency preparedness events and has gotten multiple comments from emergency responders about problem areas they've encountered where the condition of a discontinued road hampered emergency access. Maine Roadways also has a collection of news reports on such accidents. I think I could make another whole slideshow on that. Used by hunters, trappers, fishermen, berry pickers, mushroomers, people cutting tips for Christmas wreaths, all kinds of reasons that people want to go in there. Discontinued road in Wayne where one trapper drove in and out in the same 2 ruts. This picture was taken soon after it happened several years ago. Now the whole hill is washed out. Access to lakes for boating may not be possible where there is no actual access to the water without crossing private land. But that doesn't stop people from driving in hoping there is access. The Great Ponds Act allows crossing by foot over unimproved land, so fishing and swimming may be possible in the summer. Access for ice fishing and skating in the winter may depend on whether the road is plowed by a resident, so to allow motor vehicular access, or left unplowed so as to allow snowmobile access. Access to public land. If a discontinued road becomes so bad you can't get to your land, it becomes more attractive to stop having to pay taxes on it by generously contributing it to the town for parkland. In most cases I've seen, it's not a matter of retaining a public easement so as to have access to public land, but rather it becomes public land as an indirect result of the discontinuance. But if other abutters set up the road association to maintain the road, I have yet to see a town agree to be a contributing member, even when there's heavy public use, such as where there's a boat ramp. Recreational trails intended for hiking, biking, jogging, etc. should not be open to four-wheel drive trucks. Kennebec Land Trust would like to prohibit motor vehicular travel on this road that abuts their land, but they can't because it's a public easement. So people with four-wheel drive trucks drive through during mud season, ruining it for other uses. I was kind of hoping that Kathy would be here because I'd like to see what she'd think of riding her bike through that. The discontinued road in Waldo County serves 2 homes, a lumber mill, and a quarry. I know of at least 6 gravel pits in 3 counties on discontinued roads. These roads were never built to sustain 80,000 to 100,000 pound log trucks. Even in the best of conditions, a truck like this will compress the soil on the wheel tracks, destroying the crown and inhibiting water runoff to the sides of the road. Chip trucks also take their toll. A road in Washington County that had been rebuilt by a resident was used and left rutted by a logging operation. Law enforcement was reluctant to do anything, but the industry itself eventually got the logger to come back and grade the road. However, he did not replace the gravel that had been washed off or pounded out of the road. ATV trails. We pretty much did this one on the other slideshow. People following GPS. Many discontinued roads were originally through roads. Some are still at least marginally passable all the way through, and therefore the public uses them as shortcuts. Others appear on GPS as through roads, but in reality, they may not be passable all the way through, or may be passable only by high clearance four-wheel drive in dry seasons. So people who try to go through end up turning around and going back out the way they came in, doubling their wear and tear on the road. Then there's the occasional lost truck following GPS, trying to find a shortcut. We once had one on our road at 6 a.m. My husband had to help the driver back his big rig for a quarter of a mile to where my husband knew there was a roadside clearing with enough ledge under it that he could turn around without getting stuck. There have been multiple reports of people following GPS and ending up stuck in mud or on a snowmobile trail on a cold winter night, sometimes with no phone service. Use as a snowmobile trail does little damage to a road. However, it can conflict with residential use. Motor vehicles are not allowed on snowmobile trails, and snowmobiles can only travel a limited distance on plowed roads. Lifting the plow can leave enough snow for the snowmobiles, but then there's the risk of a car sled collision. I used to always have my husband raise the plow on our road. He did it without my asking because he knew I wanted to do sleigh rides on it in the winter. And so he just lift the plow up a few inches and pack a little bit onto the road. And it's great for sleigh rides, and it's also good for snowmobiles. Home construction means lots of trucks. Earth moving equipment, concrete and gravel trucks, deliveries of various building materials, carpenter's trucks loaded with tools, making daily trips for weeks. Furniture deliveries, maybe a moving van, then a fuel delivery. Vehicles in a hurry raise dust. The dust consists of the fines, which are the glue that holds the road together. Yeah, I was listening, Pete.
There you go, very good.
Multiple trucks during a construction project take a heavy toll on the road, particularly if contractors are at work during mud season. But loss of fines during dry weather is also damaging. Heavy trucking pounds the tire tracks, compressing the soil and leaving depressions where water will collect. Illegitimate uses. Discontinued roads often attract people.
Sorry, Roberta.
Often attract people looking to do things where they will not be seen. For example, drug deals or growing operations, parking, sneaking home drunk, taxing their four-wheel drive at the height of mud season, coaching, or even hiding from police pursuit, which happened on our road once. Mud running with four-wheel drive trucks. Those who test their four-wheel drive trucks on discontinued roads in mud season ruin the roads for everyone else. Trash dumping. If the landfill will charge for it, people look for a free disposal site. This is along a discontinued road in Rumford. Another spot along the same discontinued road in Rumford. I won't bother you with the other 4 photos, you get the idea. Hebo Road in Acton and Lebanon was discontinued in 1928 and was gated and considered private property until 1994. Then the court declared that when the county discontinued the road subject to gates and bars, that meant it became a public easement. Now trash dumping is just one of its problems. Note the tire in the background, way up the road there. As for the stuff in the foreground, looks like the dump just wasn't open at a convenient hour. If you're familiar with Alice's Restaurant, you'll hear it coming around on the guitar. This road is also the sole access to some public land, but heavy use by ATVs has made that access difficult, so it has been hard for the town to develop land for recreational uses. Main roadways has also had reports of people using discontinued roads as a place to dispose of unwanted kittens, lobster shells, deer entrails in at least 3 instances, or a dead dog in 2 instances. One of them was in a garbage bag, so we know it wasn't just a dog that died there. Just because a road is no longer maintained by the public does not mean no one cares. People live on these roads and own property on these roads. I think that was the last one.
Okay, so we've had a pretty thorough discussion of the types of use of public easements, some of the issues with those, and good discussion on at least one thing that might help resolve that and minimize damage. You want to take a few minutes for a little break and then come back and we'll deal with the group 2 issues. Let's say
thank you, everybody who pitched in on the discussion. That was great.
thank you for the slides, Roberta. It brought home what we were looking at and what the issues were. Take 5 minutes. Okay, you're going. Thank you. We're back. There was another subcommittee, and that subcommittee was charged with looking at limited liability for landowners. Just big picture. On public easements, some are maintained by municipalities. The cities and towns have the right, but not the obligation to maintain public easements. They can maintain them to whatever level the legislative body, the town meeting or the council decides is appropriate. You might say it's just summer maintenance. You might say that it's grading. Whatever level is set, that's what it does. And in that instance, it's passable. The abutters don't have to do anything, arguably. The town is doing some maintenance to allow it to be used. But if the town decides not to, which it has the prerogative, if it decides not to maintain the public easement, then it leaves it to the private landowners who live along that, the abutters, to repair that, maintain it. They do that at their own cost, and they do that at their own potential liability. So if you or I, just a member of the public, drives down this, you get hurt or your car gets damaged because of the maintenance that's done by the abutters, they can be sued. So that's the question here was, how can we limit liability? That's something that this commission looked at a bit last year. And in fact, we got to the point of creating draft language that in the end we scuttled. But we did talk initially about this. There is a protection for landowners who allow your land to be used for recreational purposes. If you don't charge for it, you allow the public to come on for passive recreation, and then you are not liable for damages to folks who are injured doing that recreational activity. So long as you haven't done anything to make the property dangerous, you don't put a spring gun up or you don't dig a pit or something like that, and you warn people if there are some issues. So the idea was to use that type of liability limitation and extend it to these public easements that are maintained by the abutters, not by the general public, not by the town. We sent that out in a memorandum that accompanied these papers for today. Do we want to go back and take a look at that language that's in that memorandum and see where there might be problems and if there are any other ideas for limitation of liability? Let's go back to that language. We talk about a public easement being maintained, being defined in Title 23, sections 3021 and 3022. That would take into account public easements that arise from discontinuance and abandonment, as well as those that are the old private ways, as well as those that are laid out to have access to recreational areas. So that it's pretty all-inclusive, all the different types of public easements that we recognize in the state. Repairs and maintenance, we talked about snow plowing, snow removal, sanding, ice control, grading, adding gravel and surface material, installing reclaimed asphalt or grinding existing pavement for use, installing, cleaning and replacing culverts, creating and maintaining ditches, drains, and other stormwater management infrastructure, creating and maintaining site distances on curbs and at intersections, and cutting brush, trees, and vegetation in the right of way. No remuneration, just like you can't get that limitation of liability for recreational use of property if you're charging people to be on your property, because then you're like business and you pay for insurance like everybody else. No remuneration here. The only question is that if somebody just makes you whole for materials that you spend fixing the road that others benefit for you, they can repay you for that. So the cost of equipment, repairs, maintenance, fuel, materials used, you can get back.
Hey, Jim, I got a question about
Yes.
this, because I have a case going right now where this has come up in some of our statute, but, we've had some issues with, lack of a better term. They're asking us to provide, actual deed and have the actual landowner come in for cases that there's trespass or anything like that. So I noticed in here, it's similar language. It says an owner, lessee, or occupant. And one of the things that we decided that we're probably gonna look for in some legislation is also put in there agent of. So if it's somebody that's working on behalf of, basically, these forest product companies have, they're working, for example, for a larger entity or a single person. So it may be something that we wanna put in there, agent of.
Okay, so we protect the contractor who does work on behalf of the abutting landowner.
Basically, say it's a landowner that owns like a large woodlot on there past them or something, and it's a management company that works for them. So it would be like AFM manages for John Malone,
Sure.
and they're asking us to bring John Malone in to testify because he's the actual landowner. And we work directly with AFM, so
Okay,
we don't have any contact with that person, that individual, so it may be something that we want.
okay.
Wagner would be like the same way, 'cause
Pingree
they
family.
manage land,
Seven Island.
right? They're like, if you, honestly, in a lot of places, if you go to the tax maps even, it's gonna show Wagner even though they're not the owner. It's gonna
Correct.
show Prentice and Carlisle even though they're not the owner, cause they're the acting agent who has authority to make decisions on the land. But the law is written here, which is the existing issue, doesn't acknowledge that. So they're saying unless you can go get that actual owner,
Mhm.
which in some cases is a corporation, and get them to come to Maine and be in court,
Or like
they're
Yale.
throwing it out.
Yale University.
Well, remember what we're trying to do here, and that is we're trying to protect the abutting landowner from liability for doing work on the
Well, I'm
road.
saying like, what if they are a budding landowner and they're in there? So I'm just saying
Like
like,
if
well-
Wagner does work on the road, and you're saying they're here, that they won't be protected.
Well, the purpose of this is so that Roberta does some work on the road. She's protected from liability if it's reasonably performed. Now, if Roberta hires a contractor, that would be an agent.
or has a friend come over and does work for her.
Okay, hires a friend to do that. and
Doesn't
pays-
hire him, doesn't pay him. The guy's got a tractor and.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply because it says if they receive
Yeah,
remuneration,
no
so if you haven't paid them, it's a moot point.
No, it says no remuneration.
Yeah, what I'm wondering about is, if you say you're agent, it generally would cover a contractor, and a contractor's doing this for hire and probably ought to have insurance.
I agree with that, but like, I'm just saying, like, they may not.
Yeah, the friend who does some work.
Right.
What if you said an owner, lessee, occupant or manager of property? Budding public easement, would
Well,
manager
manager
get,
usually is taking care of property for hire too. I might own 10 apartment buildings and I own a property, I hire a property manager to take care of it. They're getting paid and they have insurance. I don't know that the legislature's gonna want to protect them from liability. Right?
so that may be an issue trying to get this other thing addressed. That's the real issue is
There's no
that,
liability, like, it's not protecting from liability.
Right.
It's us getting the permission from them.
It's a different thing.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's something to look for.
Yeah,
If
no.
you're like,
I appreciate it, but I think
Yeah.
we're trying to do something a little different. You're trying to find out who do I get authority from in order to go onto the property? And the agent who's in charge here rather than somebody who's, yeah,
I just wanna make sure that it's covered and.
good point. But I think it may not be the right ad here. Because we're trying to insulate the property owner from liability and not some company that does business that should be paying claims if they do something wrong.
The property owner or property manager, this is still.
That's, I'm like, they may own land right next to Roberta.
Yeah.
It may be John Malone, but it's represented by AFM. But. Yeah,
But they're-
I get what you're saying.
They're being paid to do that.
well, all right, so that number 2 is separate though. They would still be not. No, you're saying they would be liable.
If I
So a
can-
snowmobile club that didn't work out there, they're gonna be liable as well. Correct?
Well, why would a snowmobile club be doing work on a public easement?
They do it all the time. We do them right now. ATVs and snowmobile clubs both.
Okay,
That road, that picture she showed you,
okay, but they're not doing that for pay. They're not being paid to do that. They're raising money and they're doing the work, but they're not.
they're getting grants from the state.
Yeah, Okay,
But does the
So,
money pay them for the time or for the material?
both.
But also, I mean, you're trying to shield the liability. If we put in a culvert and someone comes along and runs off the culvert, they're gonna blame us because we put too short a culvert in or something.
My question would be, that's not from the abutting owner, though. They're not receiving those funds from the abutting owner.
No, that's true. So does this say just from? Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
You're
we-
right. So that's a good point.
yeah, the idea is that if you have the trucks and you're on one of these public easements, and you have trucks on a plow and you say, I'm gonna charge everybody $100 a snowstorm to do the plowing. Or, I'm gonna charge you $200 each spring to do the grading. You're running a business,
So
essentially.
does that mean that Roberta, who's at the end and charges all of her neighbors to plow $100, she's not covered by that?
She would wind up, yeah, she wouldn't be covered by this, but unless the amount that she's charging is just enough to pay for the gas and materials. Maybe some cost of equipment.
Is it really a business though, if you just
Well,
keep?
Wouldn't you also, if you're gonna allow her to charge her like a proportional amount of expenses of the vehicle, it would be everything related to that vehicle, right? I mean, if that's the only thing she ever uses it for example, then, but I mean, if there's a certain portion that she specifically for that, you'd think if she has to pay insurances or anything like that, that a portion of that should be chargeable, so to speak, or reimbursable, wouldn't it?
Right now, the way
Basically.
it's drafted, it says that reimbursement for the cost of equipment, repairs, materials, and fuel used, they can receive. That doesn't count for remuneration.
So we could get paid back for the $1,000 to replace all the teeth on the York rate.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, good point. Or if somebody's plowing, if there's 4 of you that live on the road and one person plows it for everybody, as long as they can show that the cost of fuel and sand and everything else was split 4 ways and they weren't making a profit, then they'd be safe, right?
That's the concept.
That's the concept anyway. That's what we're trying to
If you're
do.
running it as a business and making a profit, that's not what this is
That's
about.
different.
But if you're just being
Yeah.
made your expenses, that's a different deal.
Kind of like the difference between hiring a plow guy per se versus your neighbor plowing your dooryard and you give them a few bucks.
We could say in related expenses to pick up the insurance, Steve, that's used to maintain the public easement.
Well, I think Rebecca mentioned equipment. Would that include like I'm gonna buy a new plow and I'm gonna like take a loan on it and I'm gonna charge people enough to pay my loan?
I guess the courts are ultimately gonna rule on that if there's a case.
Currently, we got a case that it's logging the equipment and that is a very broad term.
We could say to the extent used to maintain the public easement as a limitation on all of it. So if you buy the pickup truck, we're not gonna subsidize your business where you're plowing 10 other roads with that same pickup truck. But to the extent that you're using the pickup truck for this road, you can be reimbursed, essentially, made whole.
So if you buy a piece of equipment that you're using exclusively for maintaining the road,
Yeah, then that would be, you could amortize that cost among your fellow abutters.
And again, that's not authorizing you to charge X, Y, or Z. It's saying that you're not liable. Right now, you are liable. So don't overcomplicate the process to make you not liable. Because I think the reason why it never went anywhere last session is because we all overcomplicated it. So let's just clearly say, if they live on that road, they're not liable if they're doing maintenance to that road.
We have concerns with the draft, generally,
Okay,
that it's too broad and limited to the repairs and maintenance.
what else should it cover?
Well, there could be injury or damage that's not related to repairs or maintenance on the property.
So you want it, you
Well-
want coverage for that as well, you want,
Our suggestion would be to look closer at the limited liability law that already exists,
Mhm.
to see if that could be amended to, include, abutting owners on discontinued and abandoned roads.
Yeah, I think that the reason why, you know, we can do this however you wish, the reason I broke it out as a separate, similar kind of law, rather than going back and amending out, is that the 159A limitation on liability for recreational use of land is where you're inviting people onto your land to use it for trails, to use it for hiking, to use it for cross-country skiing, for any, you know, passive recreational purposes. You're inviting them onto unimproved land. And that's a little bit different than the public using a roadway, a set roadway, and the risks are a little different. The risk on a roadway that somebody's going to smash their vehicle or get hurt in their vehicle. There'll be property damage or personal injury because they're using the road if it isn't properly maintained.
but that's actually what happens with the landowner liability law more often than not. It's use of road on these landowners.
Really?
Yeah, paper
Yeah.
company roads and all of that, that's what that's all about, our trails. The ATV use of the road system, snowmobile use of the road system, it's about their roads 90+% of the time.
And the definition section, and I'm sorry, I don't have a copy for everyone, but the definition section in 159A, it describes premises as improved and unimproved lands, private ways, roads, any buildings or structures on those lands, and water standing on, flowing through or adjacent to those lands. Premises includes railway property, railroad rights of way, and utility corridors to which public access is permitted. And our suggestion would just be to add public easements along discontinued and abandoned roads to that section.
Interesting that it uses that term private ways.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Since we think that means public easements after 1976.
I know.
So maybe it's already there, we just need to change the term, but okay.
Well, let me ask a kind of reverse posting scenario here, not really, but where does it say you are liable? Is there somewhere in the law that says if you live on a if you're in a butter on a discontinued road and you do maintenance, you're liable? Where does it say that?
There's no statute that says it.
So you may be right then. You may not be liable. We may be misconstruing the idea that you are liable. Because if there's no statute that says you aren't, I would argue that that one she just read says you aren't right now.
Unless a lawyer wants to go after it and push it and push it.
Well, they can maybe, but has there ever been a case, Rebecca, has there ever been a case where anybody's actually been prosecuted, found guilty in court or anything else?
No, all of the cases have upheld that there has to be negligence and intention in
Right.
that. So if you string up a wire, that's one thing. But
Right.
if you accidentally didn't grade it correctly, there has been cases that anybody can sue anybody for anything, period.
Right.
And they do, but no, it's already well established.
So we may be chasing,
Well, if you mess with a public easement where the town has the right of the public has the right of public access, the town will go after you.
Yeah, that's the intention. Willingly, negligently, intentionally.
but they're not going after you.
You dig a ditch, right, Roberta, across the road that has a public easement on it, you might be in trouble for that.
Right.
Somebody could get injured by that.
Ditching beside it and grading it or crowning it, nobody's ever gotten put in trouble for that, have they?
Not yet, but if someone were to negligently do it,
It's like
there's a
some,
possibility.
Well,
One of
say negligently, intentionally negligently, I mean, that's the intent, right? Either you're charging a fee, so now you got extra liability like a ski area does, or a landowner does for bear baits and stuff. But if you, other than that, you're not liable unless you intentionally get, like we had a landowner who put a cable across a known trail and somebody got killed, there was a liability issue on their part because that was, and that's why we use gates and not cables, you know. But I mean, if you're just out there doing maintenance, you're trying to rock rake the road or put gravel in a washout or replace a culvert, nobody's ever been, no town has ever gone after anybody, or they've never been found liable for that, have they?
Well, the town wouldn't do that anyway. The problem more comes from an expectation standpoint. So if, for instance, on the closed winter roads, the concerns about somebody using their private equipment and plowing a path to their previously seasonal camp that they now want to live in year round. The problem with doing that on the public easement, when the town has closed that, means that there's an expectation that someone following is like, oh, this road's open, and slides off the road, and therefore the municipality is the one that's liable for not doing the safe passage, the safe and passable, because somebody just used it to get to there. So that's one of the liability places that we're trying to zip up as well. So there is that expectation piece. I think that the towns are more responsible for those types of roads because there is an obligation that's in statute that says they must be safe and passable. That doesn't exist for people on discontinued roads. And that's also the reason why, the clarification for the public easement piece that towns can use, but don't need to bring, can throw gravel out, but don't need to bring it up to that standard, is helpful because, again, there's that expectation that now they're going to have to bring it up to the appropriate road standard. If they start that, it's now clarified that's not the case. And it's been in practice and has occurred previously, but now it's pretty clear in that statute. So I think there's a difference between the town's liability and the liability that would be for someone on one of those roads. That's just.
I know there either is or was a Massachusetts law that said that when a road was discontinued, that they had to post the road to warn the public against entering thereon. And we don't have anything like that in Maine. The road can be discontinued and there's no indication that it isn't a public road. So how are people supposed to know? This is where we'd like to see some better signage saying, no road not maintained at public expense, or road not maintained for public use, or something to that effect. And there's also, when you were mentioning about the red signs that you can get for the ATV trail closings, there's a sign that we proposed that we would like to see get some official support that says, warning, it's a Class E crime to damage a public easement with a motor vehicle. Because that we think has been to some extent helpful that, at least.
Is that law?
No. We
A
just,
sign without a law would be kind of useless, but.
well, the point is that it
Yeah,
at least
no, I hear
warns
you.
people, if you damage this road, there may be consequences for it.
You could put on
As I
there
said,
that
we'd love to get that to be something official.
Cause damage to this road, you could be charged with criminal mischief.
But there's an actual statute
Yeah.
that says damaging a public easement, right?
It's Title 17, Section
That's a great-
3853D.
That's a really good statute.
Well, if it
People-
does
if people
exist,
don't
then you
know
could
about
put a
it.
sign up.
Yeah.
And if people knew that was the statute, then they'd be more likely to.
I put
Think
signs
about
up everywhere about special fishing regulations and they get ripped down. They still do the violation. It's just educational, but does help in enforcement.
Is there an existing MDOT sign of any sort like that? There isn't, is there?
Pete says you can't go down this road except at your own risk.
Pete says?
Pete says.
Anything like
I
Simon
was
said?
full time, I used to say pass at your own risk.
Yeah.
That wasn't even true.
Is that like Murphy's Law?
Darwinism.
Yeah, that too. All right, so the direction on this one is, let's see if we could try working from section 159A and see. If
Well, maybe if we can add 3 words, I think you said, versus 2 pages, that'd be a
Well, I think we would still,
perfect step in the right
we
direction.
would still need something for the environmental damage piece of it, I think.
A little on that, Carla, I was kind of wondering, like, where we were just talking about the 17A violation, like, I wonder if we could get anything in there about environmental damage also, where it's causing road damage.
Maybe reference to Title 17 just to,
Right.
so you don't have to look there as well. or just,
Is that the section the forest rangers use? Cause I mean, they charge people for stuff like that.
I don't remember what was it, do you remember what the subsection was, Roberta, on that one?
Which one is that?
The 17A, for causing damage to,
Oh, damage to a public easement, damaging a public easement with a motor vehicle is Title 17, Section 3853D.
That's amazing.
I'll tell you my key to it. I set it
See how
to music.
close you are.
3853D.
operating motor vehicle on land of another. Destruction of farmland, forest land, or public easement. Person who, as a result of operating a motor vehicle on farmland, forest land, or public easement, in fact, damages or destroys crops, forest products, personal property, or roads on that farmland, forest land, or public easement, commits a Class E crime.
Right. That's what they've charged ATVers who have left the trail and gone through the cornfield. They
So-
charged snowmobilers who went across the blueberry barren the same way.
You should.
So can we add in
So, I
there
mean,
or
why
cause
couldn't that work
environmental
here?
damage?
Well, I was just reading through real quick,
I know it's been used that way, but it seems like the way it's written.
like when you're talking
very
environmental, like what are you referring to when you're talking environmental
Well,
damage?
like the picture of the runoff from Bowling Hill Road where there's this plume of silt going down
That
into the lake.
DEP has a violation for that, I
well,
guarantee that.
Right.
true, but that's usually against the landowner.
It is.
To go, instead of the guy who's, or gal who's operating the ATV create, or the pickup truck that creates the ruts that then create erosion that then wash out the culvert.
Which
or
could
cause-
fall also back to the landowner, because they don't have the proper means of having a culvert or anything in.
Yeah, that's where it gets a little, I mean, like if there's an ATV or snowmobile in the water, like skipping on it or whatever, that's a violation on them, but when you're on the land, it becomes a little more tricky.
Well, there are two different things we're talking about, right? Holding someone responsible for the environmental damage and the liability of the landowner. I think those are two different things.
That's true. We're
What
actually
was-
trying not to make the landowner liable. That's what
Right,
we're really
and that's
worried about.
what is included in number 6 on,
Mhm.
that I think would,
Cause that's what Roberta was saying. If somebody goes out there, screws the road up, now the water's running in. As landowners, they don't wanna be liable. That's a,
Right.
same thing.
So, one of the other pictures I had there, the one where the trapper had gone in and left a set of ruts all the way down the hill. I've got another picture looking off to the side and kind of through the trees, you can see where it's lighter. That's where the pond is. It's not that far, and that water comes rushing down that hill, goes off through the woods and dumps into the pond. And I haven't been down there to the pond to see if you can see a silt plume coming out into it, but I bet after a hard rain, you probably can.
But the point is, what we're trying to do here. Is make sure that the landowner's not liable if that happens.
So
We
how
aren't
do you
trying to
catch-
actually
how do you
make
catch the guy
somebody
who
else
goes down the
liable,
truck?
right?
Well, it's not even catching the guy, it's just to make sure that the landowner doesn't like have to.
Right,
pay for
that's
the
my
fines,
point.
like, or-
We're trying to protect the landowner, not try to catch the guy. Those are two different things.
So who does pay to correct it? That was what I
They
thought
never
was
did that.
negligible.
so that's one of the questions. I mean, the way this is drafted right now, it just simply says that the landowner is not responsible and it doesn't address who is responsible. There may be a way to break it out in between the landowner and the municipality. You know, if there was an act of God or something that creates the environmental damage, then maybe the landowner should be responsible for that. But if it's caused by the public use, maybe that should be a municipal responsibility.
So obviously I wouldn't go for that. I mean, it's a tragedy of the commons, and a tragedy of the commons, the person who does the damage is the one that we should be searching. And if it's a tragedy of the commons, then the response is generally to support the commons. So an environmental fund at the state level
That's
would
what
be
I'm-
most appropriate.
And there actually is one at DEP. I mean, we all saw the pictures from the December storm. Was there any water body in the state of Maine that wasn't brown?
Mhm.
Did we go after landowners or people or whatever else? No. So I think in the big scheme of things, you gotta back away from that and just say, let's just make sure the landowner's not liable.
Well, maybe it's the excise tax on big vehicles.
Again, you're muddying the water.
Maybe it's a rain tax in rural areas as well as large cities.
If you reach over 2 inches in your town, you're gonna pay
Oh,
$2,000.
Your stormwater permit system just went up big time.
The statewide stormwater utility, probably general manager,
There is though, there is
I do that on the side myself, stormwater monitoring, so.
program at DEP that addresses stuff like this, so there's ways to go get it funded and fixed. Because the reality is,
I mean, is there a current?
not everything is somebody's
Are there
fault.
current situations that a landowner has been like responsible for that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think anyone's aware of that, just as no one's aware of anyone getting sued for their own personal maintenance of a public easement. It's just, these are possibilities.
The only activities I've ever seen where I know they went after them was either actual construction where BMPs weren't followed.
Right.
Or harvesting where BMPs weren't followed. And in the last 20 years, every time, I would guarantee you every time, there's been an issue that resulted from a snowmobile or ATV trail construction. DEP and LERT call us and say, make this go away, fix it. We're not going after the landowner, and we go after the clubs. Because that's always been, let's protect the landowner. So there's never been any cases where the landowners have been held responsible in ATV and snowmobile. We are, if they screwed up, and we go after the club or the contractor, or whoever. We had a case, Chris, you're probably aware what I'm talking about, this spring, where they tried to blame it on an ATV club, and it actually wasn't. But we resolved who did it, and they went after that operator, not the landowner, so.
Yeah, just bear in mind that what we're trying to do is protect a landowner from liability for fixing a road. And-
Right.
And that's a little bit different than protecting a landowner for the general public walking over your road. For allowing that to happen. So, or walking over your land, which is what 159.
What we're trying to say is the landowner is not liable if they do maintenance, correct?
Yep,
That's what we're really saying.
yep.
Cut to the chase.
Including.
But Rebecca, where does that leave the town? Are you saying we are now forcing the town to be liable, or do we need to?
No.
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 I
No,
think
that,
it's-
I think the question came up. I mean, so there is another standard that, to deal with the snow issue that Roberta was talking about, the closed roads and the inability to use private equipment to open a closed road. That stems from the fact that municipalities are more liable. Because once it's been opened, there is an expectation that someone is going to go down there thinking it's safe and convenient when it's obviously not. And then that is the public road, even though it's closed. That's why they can't use their private equipment on it. It's a different statement altogether.
That's true even if there's one of those road closed for winter maintenance signs?
Yeah, if someone has gone in.
And the other thing is, when you close a road to winter maintenance, you're closing a town way to winter maintenance. The town is responsible to keep that safe and convenient for passage by motor vehicle year round. And so if I go out there with my plow and I start plowing that way, not only does that create a crazy expectation or at least a misunderstanding, because I see a plowed road, I think the town's maintaining it. But I could damage that road with the plow, and the town's responsible for the damage. That's why individuals aren't allowed to maintain a town way. There's a Highway Defect Act that applies for municipalities if they fail to keep a road safe and convenient for passage. I see a pothole in the road, I see an obstruction in the road, I call a selectman or the road commissioner. They have 24 hours to either fix it or sign it. And anything that happens after that, the town's on the hook for. So the town does not want Jim to go out there with his plow and plow a town way. And that's why when it's close to winter maintenance, no one goes out there to try to plow it.
So Pete, is that why 133 is literally gated closed in the winter?
Route 133?
Wild River Road, over the other side of Bethel.
Oh, up through the.
the White Mountain.
Oh,
We end
that's-
up, we turn it into a snowmobile trail in the winter, but it's gated both ends. It's signed closed for winter maintenance, but it actually has gates on it.
Yeah, that's a state, actually a
That's a
state
state
highway.
road, yeah, I know.
State road, nothing to do with the
No.
local road.
No, I understand, but I wondered because it's not just signed closed. I mean, it actually, they gated off.
Right, that's an agreement, I think, an old agreement with probably the State Highway Commission and the National Forest Service, it goes way back.
Two questions. One is if there's a road that's closed to winter maintenance and somebody wants to plow it, should there be a sign that says, warning, not maintained for public use, use at your own risk? And the second question is, should they be closing a road to winter maintenance if somebody lives on it?
Okay, on the closure to winter maintenance, usually it's for a time period, was it not to exceed 5 years? For
10.
10 years for an order, but it can be revised after the first year, it can be amended, so
But
if there's a
they
change in well, if there's a change in circumstances, that person can go to the town and ask to have that order lifted. I'm not giving legal advice on this. but-
Cause let's see, I know of two roads that currently are not being plowed in the winter and, there's somebody living on each of them.
Mm.
One of them, the county actually ordered the town to resume winter maintenance on it because there was somebody living on it. And now the town is trying to figure out how to get rid of the road. And I know of at least two more where somebody moved in onto a road that was closed to winter maintenance and went to the town and asked them to reopen it. Three cases actually. Went to the town, asked them to reopen it, and, the town said no. And in one of those cases, the reason was because in order to make it plowable, they were going to have to fix the road because it was in such bad shape, it wasn't plowable. Which makes you wonder, are they keeping the road safe and convenient for
Well,
travelers with motor vehicles
let's-
because they're supposed to?
let's do this. Our charge is abandoned and discontinued roads.
Mhm.
Real town ways are the subject of road closure for winter maintenance orders. Let's not go down that road. Let's stick with the abandoned and discontinued roads piece. We're just using that as an explanation and I understand there are some, there's some
It's a
interesting-
functional discontinuance in my opinion.
there's some interesting cases out there, but I don't think we need to go there. I think we've probably got enough to do with just abandoned and
Right, we're dealing with what has been officially abandoned or
And
discontinued.
that's what the legislature's asked us to take a look
Yeah.
at. So I'll try reframing this limitation of liability as part of 159A. I'm just pointing out, understand 159A is to protect people from suit by folks who use
Yeah.
their land with your permission for passive recreation, as opposed to protecting you from the act of maintaining a road.
Right, which is
It's a little
different,
bit
and I would
different.
just point out, there's gonna be a lot of pushback to doing anything to 159A.
I would agree.
I think both our departments will go, don't even get near it, because it's been tried and tested, and the AG's office, and everybody else is gonna go, what are you messing with this? Cause the minute you open that door, there's gonna be. So in one sense, doing it different probably does make sense. That's why I asked if there was any law, because maybe we don't need a new law, maybe we just need to rescind the law that says that they're liable if there was
Yeah.
anything that says they're liable.
Court decisions that develop that over time. Why don't we do this? I'll do a 159A revision, see how that works, see if we can come up with something that works. And I'll send it out as a draft and we'll deal with that at the committee level and then bring it back to the next commission meeting. In the same way, we'll fix up the table for the group one issue and work on some language changes that would help there. So the next should be a commission meeting, committee meetings to talk about these. Maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then another commission meeting, get back and talk about all this and move on to some other issues as well. It's summertime, it's Maine, and summer doesn't last very long, as we know. So it's hard to schedule a lot of meetings or a lot of vacations and all.
My problem with the month of June is that I'll be acting as a counselor for Maine Robotics camps again for 4 weeks in June. And that means I'll be on duty until probably 3:30 to 4 o'clock weekdays.
Can we work an assignment in for robotics camp as part of our, no?
It's fun.
Okay. All right, so,
Learn how to use the drone, would that fit?
no. Well, it's June now. Can we maybe put a meeting for July on the books for the commission?
So in 2 weeks, it'll be the week of the 4th of July.
Huh, okay.
So maybe we want to do 3 weeks? Do the week of July
Yes,
8th?
it-
3 weeks for the committee
Yes.
meetings and
I would
then,
be gone that week.
I'll be gone most of July.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, it's the 4 weeks of July. It's the 4 weeks of July that I'm doing.
Okay.
yeah,
All
I know, right?
how about if we do this? How about the
Well,
first
that's-
week of August, if we get together for as a commission?
Full commission.
For a full commission, first week of August. What day works best for everyone? Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? Do we want to leave this to a doodle poll? Doodle poll, okay.
Okay.
If you're good with that.
Yeah, we'll do doodle poll to come up with the date for the first week of August.
Okay.
In between, the committees can meet virtually or remotely. And that'll be a doodle poll special as well, but we'll do that remotely, but we'll have an in-person meeting to the extent folks can make it, in first week in August. Steve, will that work out okay? All right,
That is perfect for me.
okay, good.
So are we continuing with the same two subcommittees or?
Same two subcommittees, let's try to wrap this up. This part of the assignment, see if we can come up with an end product, and then we can move on, get some new assignments for subcommittees. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a question about the chart?
Yeah.
Are we, in terms of the solutions and minimizations, are we picking one? Or are we providing a list of options
Let's
or?
provide the list of options, but I think one thing that we did talk about today that seems to have some utility is this idea of limitation of use for some period of time. So we'll work on that one, but feel free to mark up the chart, add to it, whatever, with no idea should.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if you wanted, because I just noticed like on the ATV side, it says landowner permission, not every trail should allow them. I don't know where trail came from, but I'm assuming you were meaning not every discontinued road.
Right.
Right,
And then you said prospectively limit public easement use to motor vehicles or foot traffic. The last change did that, right? Public easements on these moving forward exclude
Only
motorized.
on abandoned roads.
yeah, only on certain ones that happens. The question is, do you want to make that universal going forward?
Our proposal was actually that it would be retroactive,
Right.
but you thought there.
I thought there'd be a constitutionality issue.
What is the issue with that? Or we can talk offline if you want.
Yeah, we'll pursue that one.
At the committee.
Oh, the other thing I saw on there too was the snowmobiles and speed limits on public easement roads. Like there are no speed limits in the state of Maine for snowmobiles. So it's reckless operation or imprudent speed, which you have to prove. And it's pretty difficult. Most of the time they're after the incident has already occurred.
I think the concern there was when you've got, motor vehicles using the same road as snowmobiles. If they're bombing up the road, they're more likely to collide with somebody.
Yeah, I know, but that's the responsibility of the operator to drive that way.
90% of the time on the ATVs on ATV access routes, everybody goes, they're going too fast, and when we get, like, I've had the state police literally out there running radar, and they're not, it just sounds like they're going too fast because of the tire type, right? And because the speed limit, like they pass them all the time, they post 25-mile-an-hour speed limit for ATVs, but that means nothing if it's a 45-mile-an-hour road, the speed limit's actually 45, and the same thing's true on any of this. So outside of a New Hampshire style statewide speed limit, it becomes totally enforceable.
All right, well, if you have some ideas for uses, the need for access, the impacts, how to minimize those impacts with regard to the public easements, pass them along. I'll actually see.
And if
coordinator
you guys
for
wanna
those
join the subcommittee
well,
for that, so
there we
that
go.
you guys can.
loop me in at least if you, I'm back
Yeah.
now, so if I can make one of them, I'd be happy to. If we do make edits to this, do you want it?
Send them to me and then
Alright.
I'll get get the
I won't
edited
say
one out to
edits, I'll
everybody.
highlight it or whatever, just.
Yeah. All right,
One quick comment where it says motorized bikes,
yes.
does that refer to e-bikes like Kathy has, or to dirt bikes, or both?
I think it's referring to e-bikes, but I will just tell you, I'll warn you, there are 3 categories of e-bikes in the law now, so, yeah. And they're all
most
treated
landowners-
differently.
And most large landowners now are starting to ban them already.
Or what?
They're banning them on their property.
You
What
only have to
about
use
dirt
public
bikes?
roads.
Dirt bikes are an ATV.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 3 categories of e-bikes. The first 2 don't have to be registered, the last one does.
Okay.
It's kind of a whatever, but
And I will say, like, there's one of.
we've
What
It's
about
pretty-
motorcycles? Regular motorcycles?
so you mean road bikes or registered for as ATVs?
Well, a regular road bike.
So, I mean, we throw them in the category of an automobile. I don't know whether you treat them differently or not, but to me, I mean, the impact is the impact, right?
They can be registered as both.
Well, some can, some
Yeah.
can't. If it's a dual sport, it can be registered as both.
Yeah,
And right now, this is where it gets really funky, because if it's on a public way, it's treated as a motorcycle.
mhm.
But if it's not on a public way, whatever public way is, it's treated as an ATV. If it's on an ATV trail, it's treated as an ATV, and if it's not registered as one, it's an unregistered ATV, and if it's registered as a motorcycle and as an ATV, it falls under ATV law. So aren't you glad you asked?
Yes,
I'm at.
especially since I have one of those bikes that does both.
Since I rode here on a motorcycle today, I'm just gonna say, there's no way you're taking a road bike on half of
Right.
main roads, let alone.
Well, I have an
Discontinued.
on-off road, and
No,
I've
just a-
I've driven big fat motorcycles with big fat people on them with me through crazy places. So,
Can you say
It sounds like a good movie.
on that note, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I want a motion of that in a cartoon next
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
I feel like Steve's gonna be
All
riding
right.
on a wheel.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Brian, second. Chris. All in favor?
Yep.
Yep.
And this one, I'm not gonna require a roll call. We're all set. Thank you all very much. See you as a group.